Hi, this is Danny Doyle, and I'm here with another community tier list video. This time we did Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, which is generally considered to be one of the hardest games in the franchise, if not the hardest. I wouldn't say it's the hardest, but I think there's people who would disagree with me. But I thought it'd be interesting to see how people rank probably the strongest cast that we've got so far, out of any of the games that we've had. Unfortunately, normally what I do is I compare the community list to my own tier lists, but I don't actually have a tier list for Conquest. I didn't make any. Just because I don't think I'm familiar enough with Conquest Lunatic to confidently put out a definitive ordering, a definitive tier list. So that is why I brought on my friend Blue Luna, who is familiar enough with Conquest to have their own tier list, and that is what we are going to be comparing the community list to. So Luna, do you want to introduce yourself, talk about what you do for anyone who is not familiar?
Yes, hello everybody, my name is Blue Luna. I do Conquest and general Fate stuff on YouTube. Granted, not with any level of consistent upload schedule, but I like making map clear videos, sort of like demonstrating how to beat certain maps, unit analysis stuff, and I just like talking about this game a lot in general. And if you took part in the voting for this community tier list, then you probably saw me at least once in the poll comments, explaining my reasoning as I, played along with everyone. So yeah, I've been looking forward to sort of talking about this quite a bit.
I'm also excited to talk about this, because while we started off sort of on the wrong foot with Path of Radiance with one of the most absurd tier lists I've ever seen, Fire Emblem 6 and Fire Emblem Engage got a lot more reasonable. There were definitely some rankings that I personally disagree with, but not to as extreme a degree as I necessarily did for the Path of Radiance ones, and not as frequently. I felt like there were 10 million things to talk about in Path of Radiance. So I've gained some confidence in the community, which is why I wanted to test them on a cast as strong and as nuanced as Conquest, because I felt like, this is y'all are ready for this. You're up to the big kid leagues now. But also because I was curious to see what the opinions on the meta were now, because I feel like Conquest has gone through a lot of cycles in terms of, like, we had at the beginning stuff like Paladin Jacob dominance and Odin is trash, and then, suddenly people started watching Zoran videos and realized, wait a minute, it turns out if a unit can, like, trivialize the early game, maybe they're not trash. And I feel like there's a lot of very extreme statements that get put out around, Fates in general, but especially Conquest, that oftentimes come from either a lack of experience or just sort of a lack of looking at the various options available to players in the game. And yeah, I wanted to see, where the current opinions are, although I guess we are taking a more narrow slice, like it is just my audience, not the Fire Emblem audience at large. In general, pulling up the Gen 1 tier list, I've pulled up your Gen 1 tier list as well as Luna's, just sort of side by side to show they are not as far apart as you might expect, fairly similar stuff, but there are a few placements that definitely immediately jump out at me. Are there any that you want to hone in on and start talking about in terms of differences between your list and the communities that feel, for lack of a better word, egregious?
Yeah, so I also want to start out by saying, similarly to what you said with the FE6 and the Engage ones, there are some differences between our lists that I think are reasonable, even if I disagree. So, for example, one that you see here is Silas and Elise I have in S, whereas the community has them in A. And so that is a disagreement that I have, but that's not really one that jumps out to me as I need to argue that people are so wrong about Elise and Silas or whatever. Like that, it's a difference, but it's not a big one. In terms of ones that I actually do think are pretty big differences between myself and the community, I think we should start off by talking about Shura.
I was hoping you would say that, Boots Boy.
Boots Boy, indeed.
Should we talk
Shura
about him under the assumption that we don't care about the boots first, and then talk about the boots conversation? Because I think there's value in... I don't like him even if he were free. I think there's value in discussing that before going on to, and here's why the boots are better as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, disregarding the existence of the boots for a moment, Shura joins you pretty late among the Gen 1 cast. In fact, he's actually the last unit outside of the My Castle units, Izana and Flora.
Mm-hmm.
So that's already a mark against him, but it's also the simple fact that the main thing that he sort of has going for him stats-wise is that he is a fast bow unit. So, Adventurer, 7 move, C-rank bows. He can use the Shining Bow, with his magic. I believe he has something like 12 magic, 18 strength at base. The big problem with Shura is that he is very replaceable in what he wants to do by units who are more available, and because they are not Corn sexuals, they have other advantages.
It's worse than you say. It's 18 strength, but only 10 magic. So
18 strength, 10 magic. Okay, thank you.
Not quite the Nyx archetype.
The main comparison point would be Niles. If you compare a promoted Bow Knight Niles, who you would actually have at this point in the game, let's say for Chapter 17, Ninja Cave, right? Because that is sort of, that's what Shura is known for, is he comes in right before the Ninja Cave, and then you have a bow unit for that map. Bow Knight Niles is going to have very similar stats to Shura, except he's also going to have 2 more movement without needing to spend a Heart Seal to go into Bow Knight. He's going to have support bonuses, which Shura does not have. He's going to have better growth rates, so he's going to be, you're going to get more out of him in the long term. And that's a pretty consistent trend for Shura if you sort of go down the list of the other possible bow units that you'd have at that point, like Bow Knight Selena, or Sniper Effie or Mozu. He just, even if you just want to use him for the Ninja Cave, he's already outclassed by more available units in that regard.
I pulled up 21 Niles, which I do think it's reasonable to have Niles higher than 21, but I just wanted to use that as a baseline, and he's got 1 less strength, 2 less skill, and 2 less luck than Shura. And everything else... 3 less HP. No, 2 less HP, sorry, the rounding. But everything else is actually exactly even. He has the exact same speed, the exact same defense, the exact same resistance. It's kind of funny, because he's just in the better class, like Bow Knight as opposed to Adventurer. And, I think Niles is the most damning, because he has Lock Touch, which is sort of the big thing, is you might have some other fast bow units, but do they roll compress, Lock Touch, and bows? Well, Niles does, and I think a lot of people like raising Niles if they're going for captures, or just because he's the freest bow unit. He's the one who doesn't need a seal to start training his bow rank.
Yep. And also, even though he is slightly behind Shura in certain areas, the supports do make a difference. So it's for example, he has 1 less strength, but he also, let's say you wanted to give your bow unit a strength backpack to, have enough strength to one-round something, right? You might want to give, if you have a Berserker Arthur, you might want to give Shura that backpack. But Niles has an Arthur support, which you can raise very early on. You have plenty of time to raise that. And if you do, Arthur's going to give more strength and skill, because those are his para bonuses. He's going to give more strength and skill to Niles than he would to Shura, meaning that in that comparison, it's like, oh, Shura has gone from having a slight lead in strength and skill to being even or worse than Niles if you were to give either one of them that backpack. So the support bonuses do matter in that regard. And of course that's just guards, and there's attack stance as well. But yeah.
And it's not like Niles is the only bow unit who can do the Ninja Cave job. Like, you've got Mozu and Effie as options, you've got High Invest Nyx as options, Laszlo and Selena both have Bow Knight as pretty good combat routes for either of them. And then that's without even going into the Gen 2 units. Like, if you're using Niles, then hey, you probably also have Nina. Maybe not at this point, but maybe. It's very possible to get Niles married by now.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Soleil is another one, although I think recruiting her by now is probably a bit of a stretch. But you'd also don't need to be a bow unit to be the person who handles Ninja Cave. Because there's another person who has 2 range and lock touch in their base kit, who's generally considered to be pretty good and pretty fast, and that's Kaze.
Yes, and that does kind of segue into the other thing about Shura, is his other sort of claim to fame is having native access to, being able to be a soul ninja, because he has fighter and he has, and he has ninja, and he can carry some other stuff into that too, like he has movement +1, which other soul ninjas aren't necessarily going to have.
Mm-hmm.
You can go mechanist to maintain his bow rank. The kind of problem with that is, for one, you do need to spend 2 heart seals to make that happen. Which, 2 of the 5 heart seals on 1 unit, 2 of the 5 early heart seals on 1 unit is a really big ask. I am Odin's strongest soldier, and even I would not say, yeah, spend a heart seal on Odin to get Vantage, and then spend a second one to go back into a magical class or anything like that. And so, for Shura to want that is a lot, and what you get out of it is still, I would argue, mostly worse than the other Soul Ninja candidates. Obviously, Silas is the biggest comparison point. But even other ones, if we're talking about scaling into the late game, there's Baruka and Soleil who stand out to me as big Soul Ninja units. And just if you actually look at their averages and combine that with the fact that Shura lacks support bonuses, he's just kind of going to be not strictly worse, because again, he has movement +1, he has bow rank, there's other advantages, but to ask for 2 heart seals just for that is a lot.
And while Silas being sort of the big comparison also requires 2 seals, I would say a friendship seal is a lot less in demand than a heart seal. Partially because you're not going to complete all of the friendship chains that you want to complete, but also partially because there's just not as many people who really want an immediate reclass into a friendship class, unless it's for something like child inheritance, which oftentimes can wait until you have more available, or that's the big one, is either child inheritance or going into your sort of final class, because there are, if you get really cheesy, you can do stuff like, Kaze uses friendship to go into Cavalier, and then a heart seal back into Ninja, and depending on how much money you want to spend. But for general purposes, I feel like there's just fewer people using the friendship or partner seals in the case of, marrying Kaze to get Ninja.
Yeah, and the other part of that as well is that if you want to go into Hero immediately to start getting Soul as soon as possible, now he's in a much worse class for the map that he's supposed to be really good in.
Yeah.
Or you stay an Adventurer, but then you're putting off getting soul and getting dagger rank for later.
I think in Conquest that's less of a big deal because he is only promoted level 2 as opposed to in Rev where he starts out at 10.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I think it's perfectly possible to spend one map in Adventurer. You know, if he only... I guess technically he doesn't need to get 3 levels in Hero. Because I was thinking, like, just keep him below 5. But no, he needs to get Strong Riposte and Good Fortune, too. Good Fortune's key to the build.
Well, no, he has Fighter, so it would be HP plus 5 and
Oh, right,
Gamble.
right. Yeah. Oh, God, Gamble.
Yeah, Gamble. Everyone's favorite skill. Yeah, it's not like the biggest deal, but it is kind of another hurdle for him. It's like, okay, well, now you have to choose between performance on Chapter 17 or, getting Soul and going into the Ninja class sooner. And the biggest thing to me as well is that you could argue that, like, oh, even though he's worse than the other bow units, there's nothing wrong with having more. And normally I would agree, but the problem is that he's not just the second, like, it's not just that he's worse than 1 or 2 other bow units, I would argue he's worse than most others. And so, like, if Niles was your only bow option, then I would say, like, yeah, Shura as a second bow unit is good, but do you really need Shura as, like, your 5th or 6th bow unit on your team? Probably not.
And all of that is, like, at least in my opinion, would be enough to not really earn him a deployment slot unless you just really like him. Because I know he's a character a lot of people like because of his relationship with the, Kotaro, is that the guy's name? The Moshikan leader?
Yeah.
And, like, the fact that he was the one who kidnapped Azura, and there's some cool stuff, like, lore-wise with him, so by no means am I saying, like, if you use Shura, you're bad at Fire Emblem, and you should delete your save file or anything like that, but more that using him feels like an active choice to, I value you as a character, as opposed to, I'm using you because you're good, right? And that's before, all of that is before factoring in that recruiting him costs you one of the best movement, like one of the best stat boosters in the game, a movement stat booster. I know a lot of people will say, like, oh, well, these boots are actually bad because they're only 1 movement, and in the games like Teleus and Game Boy Advance and whatnot, the boots used to be 2 movement, but I find that argument, I understand where it comes from, because it's like, you had something and it got taken away from you. You had the 2 move and it got taken away from you, and now it's only 1 move. But it is still an extra point of move. Like, one of the selling points that Shura has over the other non-Niles bow users, one of the legitimate niches he has, is movement +1. It's a good skill. It's good on him. The boots are functionally movement +1, like, bare minimum. They're the skill movement +1 to someone who doesn't have it. And then, of course, they can stack with movement +1 to be 2 points of move. They can stack with a movement backpack to be 2 points of move, or 3 if you have all 3 combined with each other. So I don't necessarily think that, like, them being weaker than they were in previous entries it doesn't make them bad. It just makes them slightly less broken. It's the same with, I feel like in the 3DS era, they recognize that certain stats are stronger than others. So Goddess Icon gives 4 luck now instead of 2, and the boots only give 1 move instead of 2. It feels similar to me to how FE1 stat boosters were kind of ridiculous for anyone who hasn't played FE1. Most of them gave, like, 5 or 6 in a stat. The boots gave 4 movement, and then after that game, well, after FE3, I guess, they had to retool them and be like, oh, actually, let's not make these as broken as they were.
Right. Yeah, the boots are still very strong, especially because you can combine them with movement tools that were not in the previous games, such as pair up.
Yeah.
And I think there is sort of this idea, I think maybe because of the existence of sort of like LTCs and such, I think there's kind of an idea that boots are only kind of useful if you are doing this sort of like low turn count, like pre-planned run where you know exactly when that extra point of movement is going to come in handy. But I would disagree, and I think the boots are kind of, in a way, kind of like any other stat booster where you don't have to know exactly when that stat booster is going to help you do something you weren't able to do before in order for it to be valuable. You don't know when... You're not going to know, like, every single doubling threshold that a Speedwing is going to let you meet. But that doesn't make a Speedwing bad. It's going to come in handy throughout the course of your playthrough. That extra 2 points of speed. And the same is true of the boots. You do not need to do a, like, pre-planned low turn count run at all for the boots to come incredibly helpful. Whether it be because, oh, that one extra point of move lets me get out of enemy range here, or reach this enemy that I want to reach. Or like Danny said, you can combine it with other things. So, let's say that normally you would be 2 spaces away from reaching an enemy. Boots let you get 1 more point of move so that you're only 1 space away. Combine that with a movement pair up, suddenly you're right there. And again, not necessarily in a pre-planned sense, but more so in the sense of, if you're paying attention, you're gonna notice when all those moments come up when you give the boots to a good unit, even if you didn't plan it beforehand.
Yeah, and I would say if you don't have, like, a specific plan for the boots, just slapping them on one of your generically good combat units, like Xander or Camilla are right there, but even your Soul Ninja, if you've got, like, a super unit like that trained up, or Leo, like, I can't miss the chance to propagandize Leo.
True.
And then, you know, obviously, if you are doing some amount of planning where it's like, well, this is what I want this unit to do on this map, then you probably are at the point where you know what you want to do with the boots. But even without, like, yes, you do have other ways to bolster your movement, and you probably don't need all of them in the same turn on the same unit. Like, you probably don't need to have a movement pair up, the skill movement +1, the boots, swap from Haitaka, shove from Kumagera, all combined on the same unit, unless you are really pushing the game to its limits and trying to low turn it. But you also, if you have, you know, let's say you give the boots to Xander, right? And he needs to move 9 squares. Well, now he can afford to keep his Berserker backpack that you want on him, because everyone loves Berserker Charlotte, which is why she's in C tier, or B tier, whatever. Yeah, she's in B tier, because everyone loves Berserker Charlotte. So, like, giving Xander the boots lets him keep that and still move the extra square, as opposed to... Because the counter-argument goes like, oh, well, Shura gives plus move anyway. Well, only if you have him paired into someone, which means he's not giving support bonuses, he's just giving his base class bonuses. Presumably Adventurer, although I guess Bow Knight and Ninja also give the +1 move. But if the reason you're using him is to be functionally the boots, then he's probably not getting a ton of investment. But yeah, like, now suddenly if you need Xander to move 9 squares, he can't keep his Berserker backpack. You can't keep your, like, bulk backpack on your Ninja, those sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely. And also, even if all you care about is the movement pair-up, then he is hardly unique in that regard, because it's entirely class-dependent. So there's plenty of classes in the game that give movement pair-up that don't require you to field a mediocre combat unit.
And even if you are just fielding them to be, like, a plus movement, they will give better stats since they can build supports. Like, there are both male and female units that enter plus move classes or just start in plus move classes. And as a result of that, like, if you want extra movement on a unit, they can just then also benefit from C rank or B rank support, whereas Shura only really gives the full bonuses to Corrin. Which Corrin's a pretty good unit, but like everyone can give bonuses to Corrin.
Yep. And hey, if you want a Corrin sexual who gives really good bonuses to Corrin, Gunter is right over there.
And he gives plus move in his base class.
Yep.
In addition to generally better stats than Adventurer, like I would prefer the bulk and strength over. What does Adventurer even give? It's like skill.
It's 4 speed, 2 res, 1 movement.
Oh, the speed is good though. 4 speed actually is good, but 2 res.
It is worth noting though, Gunter also has access to Bonite, so.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Take that as you will. Yeah, neither of us are very enthusiastic about Shura. As y'all can see, I put him in D tier. I do think he's probably a bottom 5 unit in the game. As Danny said, like the tier list did factor in recruitment cost, and I do think that, like, you know, we should factor in recruitment cost when talking about units, right? If using Shura means not getting the boots, then that matters, and it needs to be factored in.
And when I say recruitment cost, I do mean specifically concrete costs. So, because I know a lot of people talked about certain child paralogs they found difficult. And the reason I don't factor that in is tier lists in general are subjective, but I think when it comes to difficulty, it becomes, like, a lot more subjective. Like, how do you account for, well, I personally I find Ophelia's paralog fucking cancerous. But I'm not going to put her in D tier because I don't want to play her map. You know? Mm-hmm. Whereas Shura, there is a concrete, like, if you recruit him, you don't get this. Similar to units from, like, the Game Boy Advance days, where it's like, spend this amount of gold to recruit this unit. I know Volk is like that in Radiant Dawn, although it's a lie, because he gives you more gold than you spend on him in the following map. Farna, right? Hugh.
Yeah, Hugh as well.
Renak, technically, if you got LaRochelle killed in an Iron Man setting, would fall into that same category. Beowulf. Yeah, those are the only ones I can think of. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone. Comment below if I am.
Actually, Danny, you're forgetting FE9 Volk, who costs 50 gold for every lock he picks. That's a unit cost.
If only he had lock touch like Shura did.
Then he'd be a B tier unit.
He'd be a B tier unit. Speaking of B tier units, what are your thoughts on Charlotte Fire Emblem?
Oh, my thoughts on Charlotte Fire Emblem. Charlotte. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Charlotte.
But have you considered Berserker gives? Have you considered the stats Berserker gives?
Okay, I've considered a lot of things. Let's talk first, before we get to the main thing about Charlotte, which is the backpack stuff. Like, that is kind of the main thing. If you looked at the comments under, like, the Charlotte poll, that is kind of the main reason a lot of people put her in B tier, is because they valued that. I do want to talk a little bit about her combat and, like, her stats first, because, you know, that is also relevant to her as a unit.
Yeah.
They're bad.
Yeah.
She joins with pretty poor bases. Obviously, her performance on her join map is really sad because she has a steel axe, she has gamble, she's not, like, her hit rates are going to be pretty bad.
Yeah. I don't think that's, like, reflective of her long term, but it is a very bad first impression.
Yeah, obviously you can take off gamble and give her a better weapon, like, after the fact. But she's still not that great. She has really high strength and speed growths, but her bases in those stats are not great. 15 strength is okay. Danny, I know you don't even believe that, but
I'm pushing it. I know, I'm pushing it.
15 strength base is okay, but it would be a lot better if she had better speed. 13 base speed is okay, but not great. She has to grow into her player phase nuke kind of role. And I do mean that because while she does have quite a bit of HP, part of that is carried by like her class and the fact that she has HP plus 5. So anyone else who like goes through fighter either permanently or temporarily is going to sort of shore up that difference compared to her. But also like really poor defense and resistance as well. And so she's not gonna like die instantly. Like she has enough HP to take a hit pretty much all the time, but you are gonna have to put in a lot of work if you really want her to be an enemy phase unit. She does have native access to soul daggers because she can promote to hero and then heart seal into maid. But the problem with that is that for the most part, she's just kind of worse than other units who would want to be doing the same thing. Like she has good. She doesn't have damage boosting skills natively. Like she doesn't have elbow room or strong riposte or anything. And her defense and res are going to be quite poor, so you need to supplement those.
And that's in Maid, which is the bulkier of the two dagger classes.
Yes.
Only slightly, but still. Like, Charlotte gaslit me into thinking that Maid was less bulky because I was like, oh, she's like super frail as a soul maid. Damn, I should have sent her ninja. I guess technically the 3, like, Mechanist is bulkier than Maid Butler, but like, no, don't go Mechanist.
Yeah, no, Charlotte, yeah, you like, obviously she can do it, but she is just going to be worse than a lot of the other units, and have a rougher start, because again, her starting performance, even after you remove Gamble, is just not very impressive, at all. And you do have to get her out of that rut. And as a player phase delete button in, like, Berserker or something, you know, again, she grows her strength and speed, but at the same time, to be honest, if I'm training up an under-leveled unit, I kind of want them to be a bit more than a player phase delete button, or at the very least, I want their starting contributions, I want them to scale better, and I want their starting contributions to be better. A great example would be like Mozu.
Bozu.
Yeah, bows are better for if you just want a unit to kill things on player phase. Like, bows are better than axes in this game. And she starts off more competent because there's flyers in chapter 10 she can kill for free compared to Charlotte, who doesn't really have an equivalent.
There's armors. There's armors. You can give her the hammer. Like, you said she starts with the steel axe, but you can hand her the hammer. People do it for Odin all the time.
Well, actually, Danny, you don't get the hammer until after her join map.
Oh, shit, you're right. No, I gaslit myself again. Fuck. The Armor Slayer. You can hand her a Master Seal and an Arm Scroll, and the Armor Slayer. That's what you do.
So true, except you don't get the Arm Scroll until the village on that map.
Fuck! You Looney Tunes keep those armors alive while you run around to get the Arm Scroll for her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rough.
Charlotte does have one kind of cool quality. It's not fully unique, but it is relatively unique, is that she's one of the females who can actually access Wyvern, which I believe Perry and Selena are the other two. Well, I guess Elise as well. But oftentimes it can be hard for the physical females to access the Wyvern class just because you can't marry Camilla or Baruka, because homophobia.
Right.
But she has, I think she has Baruka friendship, right?
Yes. She does. And that is something, although, to be honest, if I want a unit who's combining the stats and skills from, like, the Fighter and Wyvern class lines, I'm going to use Baruka. But
Or
yeah,
Percy,
like it is something,
like if we're counting Gen 2 units, he also
or Percy,
gets that
yeah.
pretty freely.
Yeah. So like, and I mean, you know, like you said, like Friendship Seal not as like rare as a Heart Seal or like valuable. So there's that. Again, I don't think it shores up her bulk compared to Berserker. It's probably one of her better class options if you are using her long term. But again, it kind of doesn't help the initial problem of a pretty rough start.
Definitely. Well, and people penalized Selena for taking 4 maps to get into Wyvern, and that's a fast friendship. Charlotte does not have a fast friendship, so it takes her 5 maps. I guess
And
the only advantage over Selena would be, like, she keeps her weapon rank, but, like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Charlotte
Bronzes,
also joins 3
bronzes
maps,
are fine.
3 maps later.
Yes, that too, yeah. So it's gonna take a while to come online.
Yeah, compared to Selena. So yeah, Charlotte combat prospect's not great. But if we look at the the thing that a lot of people actually cited, which was the pair up utility, I'm not very high on that either for a couple of reasons. One thing is I know Danny and I both agree on this, but we would both kind of much rather have a unit who is not a purely deployed for the pair up, but rather has a good pair up but can also fight. And when I say can also fight, I don't mean like top tier one of your best combat units, but like can fight, which is not really base Charlotte compared to the rest of your army at that point. A great comparison point would be Keaton.
I was just gonna bring him up.
Yeah, Keaton joins 1 chapter after Charlotte, but a lot better bases. You can instant promote him, and not only is he gonna have like way better stats than an instant promoted Charlotte, but he's gonna like scale better later on. And his base combat is like actually pretty solid.
Yeah, he's got some stuff holding him back, but it's not like unusable. Like I mean, mostly just one range lock and only being able to use specific weapons. But it's still like he's a big ball of stats.
Yeah, but he's not like, you're not necessarily going to be using him as like one of your main like juggernaut units necessarily, but he is someone who can do combat when you need him to, while also giving the same good pair up. The only thing that Charlotte really has that is unique to her with her pair up is one, her personal pair up bonuses are very much geared towards offense. It's all strength and speed, which compounds with Berserker. And 2, she, compared to the other units who start in fighter or I mean, Keaton doesn't start in fighter, but like in terms of pair up bonuses, it's very similar, right?
Wolf Signer gives 4 strength, 4 speed. Berserker gives 5 strength, 3 speed. And I think if you're promoting the fighter to be a backpack, it is Berserker. You're going that route. But even if you've not spent a seal on them, it's 3 strength, 3 speed from Wolfskin versus 4 strength, 2 speed from fighter. Which, considering the big thing Charlotte gets credit for is helping Xander out, I don't think people are saying that Xander's strength is the stat that needs support.
Well, so that's the thing, right? Is compared to the other units who give those bonuses at base, Arthur and Keaton, she's the only one who's female.
Yes.
The problem with that is that how many men in the game, and this is like a genuine question that I asked myself the other night actually, because I was kind of thinking about this, like, how many male units in the game genuinely want both strength and speed? And the answer is not as many as you would think. Obviously, if they only want one of those stats, Charlotte can still be a good backpack. But what it means is that if they only want one of those stats, then Charlotte's pair-up becomes a lot more replaceable, especially by units who actually have better combat. The main example would be like Danny brought up Xander. Xander doesn't. There are some instances where having more strength on Xander helps him to like one-shot like frailer enemies. But in the long term, a lot of what he really wants is the speed that Charlotte gives. And there are other units, there are other female units who give him a class that he wants, like Hero, while also giving speed. Selena's being the main comparison point. Bow Knight doesn't give strength, but it gives skill, speed, and movement, which I would argue is generally better for Xander, while also giving him hero access for Soul.
That 80 hit Siegfried, it needs the skill support, and if you're doing guard stance instead of attack stance, you don't get the +10.
Yup, and give strong riposte. For if you did need the extra damage, it compensates somewhat for the lack of strength pair up with strong riposte.
Well, in the long term. In the short term,
in the long term,
more strength. But also, do we care about... I guess there are some thresholds in Ninja Hell that, like, a Forged Bronze Lance gets you, and maybe you could save on a Forge or something. But I think in the short term, you don't really care about the strength thresholds as much as speed.
Yeah, and unlike Charlotte, Selena is actually good at combat, both like at base and also, she has pretty solid growth. She scales well. So, and if you look across the cast, it's like how many men want strength and speed? Like, Kaze doesn't want speed; he wants strength and defense. Like he'd rather have like a Baruka pair up. You look at
or even like Great Knight Parry or something.
Yeah, or Great Knight. You look at like why am I blanking on units all of a sudden?
Silas. Silas wants speed.
Silas. Sure, yeah. Silence wants speed in the short term. But there are other units who give him that. And then if you're going ninja, then he doesn't necessarily want speed as much as he wants like, some bulk support. And if you want him to go a flying class or something, well, then he can't marry Charlotte because he needs to marry for a flying class. You go to like Laszlo. Laszlo doesn't really want strength support, and also if you just wanted to marry for like rally strength, he has access to rallies. He has rally strength through Keaton.
Yeah, he can save his marriage for a different one that he doesn't get through friendship.
Yeah, so it's like, again, that's not to say that like if you pair Charlotte into like Silas or Xander that they're not gonna do well, but what it means is that what she provides is more replaceable by units who are actually going to have better stats.
Oh, who actually you didn't mention this. Who really appreciates getting access to fighter through Charlotte marriage?
Yes.
Benny. I always thought they should have a fast support because he doesn't have enough options for accessing fighter.
So true.
The joke here is it's his Heartsteel class and also all of his Conquest friendship classes.
Yup.
I still swear, because they join on the same map, they know each other. Just give them a fast support. Just fucking rub the salt in the wound.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, should we talk about why? Because you sort of brushed over why we both like somebody who is able to both backpack and fight. Because on the surface, if all you're doing is backpacking, it seems like, well, Charlotte's combat doesn't matter if she's just giving someone stats, right? But the reason I like it is if you're not doing a hyper pre-planned run, you might run into a situation where, oh no, suddenly, I've got my Wyvern Xander, and there's a bow unit in this group that he needs to fight. Well, thankfully, I can switch to Selena for a turn, and she can take things on. Or, Camilla took a lot of damage last round. I don't have the action economy to staff her up. I'll just switch to Keaton, and he can take on things for a little bit. So it's not necessarily like, if you have, just backpack Charlotte, well, she can't really do that without dying.
Well, and you you say if you're not doing a pre-planned run, but I would also argue that if you are trying to do, speaking of someone who kind of has done stuff like that, either like for individual maps or for entire runs, like the fact that the the pair-up unit also has stats that you can use and that they can actually fight gives you more strategic flexibility, like even if you are trying to plan something out in advance.
Yeah, that's what I was getting towards in terms of, because then you can cut down on the number of staffers or whatever if you're like, well, this person gets hurt and then they can hang out in the back the rest of the time.
Yeah, or just in general, it's like, okay, I can send this duo to fight this group of enemies, knowing that once the first one gets roughed up, I can switch to the second one, and, the person in the back can also do well. Again, like, you can totally staple a, like, instant promoted Berserker Charlotte to Xander, and have Charlotte never see combat, and Xander's still gonna do well.
So we did not run.
That's a very valid way to play the game. But in terms of actually evaluating Charlotte as a unit, what she's actually contributing is very replaceable, and you can often do more with other more competent units.
I guess the only argument would be, like, if you never plan on switching her to the front, then you might as well put the person who's bad at combat in the backpack role, but at that point, it's kind of like damning with faint praise. Like, it's not, oh, you're really good at backpack because you offer backpack uniquely. It's, you're really good at backpack because I will not fucking miss you. It's kind of like how in Fire Emblem Engage, I say that Jade is a really good unit to take into chapters 10 and 11 because she can do filler combat in chapter 10, and then she can hang back and bait the freeze staff person in chapter 11 so no one else gets killed. And I maintain that that's like a great way to use her, but I would never say that that makes her a good unit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And before we move on, we should also talk about the other fighter in the room, right?
Oh yeah, Benny.
Right.
Well, I feel like people overlooked his
closer.
Berserker backpack.
Well, Benny's actually closer to the tier that I would put him in. Actually, that's not true. It's a 1-tier difference for both, but there is a different placement that I wanted to talk about.
Should we talk about Justice?
Do you want to start off on Arthur?
Yeah, Arthur. So, a lot of people really don't like Arthur because his combat in the early game, it's described as completely unusable. He'll miss everything, and everything has 15% crit on him. And I think people are being, hyperbolic, but I understand the sentiment, especially if you don't remove Gamble or you don't buy him a Bronze Axe. Arthur can struggle early on, but if Charlotte is able to get B tier on the basis of backpack alone, Arthur's the only fighter backpack you have for the first chunk of the game, including Chapter 10, which is one of the harder maps in the campaign. So, just on the grounds of being a fighter backpack alone, if Charlotte is getting elevated up to B tier, then Arthur should as well. But I would also argue that Arthur's combat is generally better for his join time than Charlotte's is for her join time. Like, he can do the thing we were describing, where you have someone who isn't a combat all-star, but can do some decent combat as a primary backpack role, and then when you run into a situation where you need to, either fight a group of enemies that the person he's supporting isn't good against, or they're injured and you need to take a turn off for something else, switch him to the front and have him do stuff. But I'd also argue that Arthur is good outside of the backpack role in a more attack stance-oriented playthrough, just because he benefits from the innate hit that you get from him attacking an attack stance. But he also offers really good support bonuses in attack stance. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about these because they oftentimes are less impactful than the solid stats you get on pair up, but most units have some amount of bonuses associated with them, or not most units, all units have some amount of bonuses associated with them for being an attack stance, and Arthur gives approximately a bajillion hit to whoever his support partner is, which can be pretty good. I would say that's, approximately a bajillion. I don't have those numbers exactly right, but I think it's actually 30 at A support is what it actually is.
30 at S support.
30 at S support, okay.
Yeah, 20 at A support.
20 at A.
Which is
20 is still a lot.
Yeah.
And actually, you might know, because I don't know, because he has a support with Niles. Does he offer those bonuses if Niles is in attack stance with him, even though he can't give a dual strike for capturing?
I believe capturing also, you can't benefit from support bonuses while capturing.
Damn.
So, nobody can give Niles
that's so sad.
That.
At least you get the plus 10 for attack stance, but
yeah.
We'll talk about capturing in a bit.
Oh god, yeah. So, yeah, Arthur is, like you said, the fighter pair-up is a lot more significant early on because he is your only one. And especially because there's multiple early game units who specifically want, or can specifically benefit a lot from Arthur pair-up. The two main ones are Effie and Niles. Effie to activate Puissance and hit like one-shot thresholds, although even then, like you said, they're also nice in attack stance with each other. They can one-round things in attack stance, and Arthur can give a nice hit boost.
Especially if you're using, like, Javelin and Hand Axe to enemy phase.
Yeah. And Niles, being a fast bow unit, getting +4 strength, +2 speed on Niles lets him one-round a lot of things. Or even, again, in attack stance, like, Niles is doubling a lot of things without a pair-up, and so, 2 hits from Niles' Iron Bow plus an Arthur dual strike can also kill, quite a few things. So, he provides I would say, more significant and more unique support value than Charlotte in that regard. But also, yeah, his combat is, better for his join time. Like, the big thing sort of against him is, like, you don't have quite as many hit boosting tools early on, but also
you have 2 Heartseeker users.
Actually, wait, yeah, what am I talking about?
You have Odin
never mind.
and Nyx. Like, in his join map, you don't have any hit boosting skills, but you get Odin the next map, and then Nyx the map afterwards.
Yeah, I guess more so, what am I trying to get at? You just have more tools in general later on, so it can be easier to patch Charlotte up.
That's
but also,
fair. I mean, she joins alongside Benny.
Yeah. But also, like, again, Arthur's hit rates early on, and also, I should note, even though Charlotte does have a better, like, if we're comparing them long-term, right? Even though Charlotte does obviously have a better luck growth than Arthur, Arthur has a better skill growth and a better skill base for his level. And every point of luck is half a point of hit, but every point of skill is 1.5 points of hit. So, in the long term, Arthur is going to... Well, I say in the long term, but if you've been training Arthur, he's going to be higher leveled and have overall better stats than Charlotte when Charlotte joins. And then in the long term, as you compare their stats, like, Arthur is going to have better hit, and similarly very good strength. He's just going to be, like, a little bit slower.
The luck does definitely hurt him in terms of facing enemy crit, though. I feel like he's one of the few characters who doesn't fully get crit issues offset by holding a bronze weapon.
Sort of, yes. like we sort of mentioned before, well, I say mentioned before, this was off camera. We were talking a little bit.
Yeah, we're talking about Hero versus Zerker, and how... I would say, honestly, for both Charlotte and Arthur, but especially Arthur, Hero is just the better path.
Yeah, Hero provides a more skill and luck on promotion, compared to Berserker. In fact, I'm actually going to, real quick, I have Serenus Forest open on the side.
Well, you lose luck going from Fighter to Berserker. You lose 2 points.
Yes. So real quickly, comparing Hero to Berserker, Hero has 3 more luck and 2 more skill. So there's a hit difference there, but also Berserker has a -5 crit avoid penalty, which exacerbates Arthur's problem a lot. So Hero has just more crit avoid than Berserker in that sense as well.
Well, and in Hero you get some weapon triangle control, which can also help address hit issues. Swords are generally worse than axes in this game, I would say, but if you're worried about accuracy, swords are more accurate, and you can leverage, axes against lance enemies and swords against axe enemies.
Yeah. It is slightly slower than Berserker by 1 point. I'm not going to say that 1 point of speed never matters, but, I think the trade-off, it is a bit bulkier as well. I think the trade-off of better hit rates and higher crit avoid is well worth.
Alright, we're going to talk about the ODoyle stuff.
Worth being 1 point of speed lower.
Well, especially for the 2 native fighters, because they do end up... It's not like these are units who are, sitting on the edge of doubling versus not doubling.
Mm-hmm. The other thing also, and this was another thing Danny brought up to me off camera, is that if you're using Arthur, you're pairing him off. And if you're pairing him off, that means you get to recruit Percy. And obviously, I'm not just going to assume that you're always going to get a good Percy and that you're always going to be fielding him alongside Arthur. But it's reasonable that you would. And in instances where you are, Percy and Arthur complement each other very well. They work very well together.
Fortunate Son is my favorite personal skill. I know it's not the best one, but I love it.
Yeah, and Fortunate Son helps out Arthur quite a lot. So, yeah, ultimately, I'm not saying Arthur's, amazing or whatever. His hit rates can be a little dicey sometimes. His luck is something that you're going to have to, pay attention to with crit rates. But I do think he is B tier. Just for his really high availability, the fact that his pair-up is genuinely something, a unique form of support that he gives at that point in the game. And he scales better into the later parts of the game than you would think, if you're only judging him off of base performance. I don't think he's amazing, but I think he's definitely a lot better than people give him credit for.
I think that... I don't know whether I would personally put him in B or C, but I do think that at the very least, he can't be a tier below Charlotte for the same job. Doing the same job, but just longer, is somehow worse.
Yeah.
I know Charlotte's because I know the big thing with Charlotte is it's her personal bonuses, but the majority of the stats you gain are from your class, especially early on when you haven't built those supports.
Yeah. But yeah, that's... I mean, if I were to, order... If this were, an ordered tier list of mine, I would have him on, the lower end of B. But yeah, the exact placements doesn't matter as much as the fact that I would also have him 2 tiers above Charlotte, because I would put Charlotte probably, high end of D.
Oh, them's fighting words.
There you go.
So, next up, this one's probably going to be painful for you, but Odin ended up in B tier. I know you're Odin's... Well, I wouldn't say Odin's biggest fan, because Zoran's still out there, but you're very Odin-pilled. You made an entire video on Odin, perhaps people can see somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I made a whole video sort of analyzing Odin as a unit. I really like him, and I do think he's S tier. And keep in mind, when I say S, like, again, if I were ordering this, I think he is the lowest of the units that I have in S tier. And I understand the B tier placement. There's a lot of people who are still pretty hesitant on Odin, either because, there are some people who still say that he's like, oh, he's D tier, like bottom tier, or whatever. But the general sort of community consensus has sort of shifted more towards the idea that he's really good in the first half of the game, and then he kind of, falls off.
Yeah.
And I think there's half a truth to that. I think you mentioned earlier when you briefly mentioned him and saying like, oh, a unit who trivializes the early game, and like he's sort of a unit who goes from very strong early on to still quite strong, but it's not as easy as like, I'm gonna slap Nosferatu on Odin and he's gonna solo half the map. But with that being said, like, just because you can't solo half the map without thinking anymore doesn't mean you're like a bad unit, right?
Marcus is still considered quite strong in the Binding Blade, and he falls off halfway through the game too.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, Odin certainly scales a lot better into the late game than Marcus.
Yeah, it's a bit of an extreme example, although I do think that, like, my second Lunatic Conquest playthrough, I leaned more into using Odin for combat, and it was just like, oh, holy shit. Y'all weren't kidding.
Yeah.
Although, the reason I bring up doing that in my second playthrough is I think, to an extent, the reason that Odin is in B tier is streamer bias. And it's not even that I think Odin is bad, although I think in the unit reviews, I made a joke about how he's F tier because you like him.
Right.
It's
because Danny is very mean to me, you all need to understand.
We didn't use Odin in our playthrough, and this is, like, unfortunately, I'm limited by the people who are on my community tab, and I don't think everyone on my community tab watched my streams, but I think there's a higher correlation between people on my community tab and people who watched us play through Lunatic Conquest than general Fire Emblem fans and people who watched us play Lunatic Conquest. And on our Lunatic Conquest playthrough, we gave Odin the Arthur treatment. We made him, permanent backpack duty in the early game. Got him heart sealed into Samurai to pass Vantage down to his daughter, and then our magical carry was Leo. And then Ophelia was, like, also there as, like, a secondary magical unit. And if that... I do think that, like, if that is the most recent exposure to Odin in Lunatic Conquest you've seen, that's probably going to make him seem worse than sweeping maps with Nosferatu in the early game. There's a few other rankings on this list that I look at and I'm like, okay, I think the reason that this unit is as high or as low as they were is because of how they performed on our streams. But Odin feels like the most extreme example because... Well,
Danny, you can say Veloria, okay?
I can say Veloria. Veloria is another one, yeah. But like, I am a huge fan of Leo, and I think it comes down to whether you value the early or late game more, who you like better. And I like Leo more just because he's awesome. But I think that Odin, an entire tier below Leo, is kind of absurd when, like, there could be an argument for him above or below Leo, but not an entire tier below Leo. Like, come on.
Yeah, I think no matter what, I would put Odin and Leo basically right next to each other. I think they are pretty similar in terms of overall contributions. It's just like you said, whether or not you value early or late more. But like, and I also, for the record, currently value Leo a little bit more than Odin, actually. despite being such a fan of Odin. But like, considering he's around for the early game that Leo is not, and then you can still, without that much effort, have Odin be your magical carry long term. I don't think it makes sense for him to be a whole tier below. I think realistically they should be pretty close to one another.
And not in the sense that Leo should be moving down.
Oh yeah, no. Come on now.
Like they are. Yeah, I really do think, I'm sure that some amount of it is like the leftover, his strength growth is higher than his magic growth sentiment, but
y'all, it's 5%, please.
I think some amount of it is, well, he was bad in your run, so he must be bad overall. Which I think is also why Keaton got a kinder treatment than I expected, because I see a lot of anti-Keaton stuff, and in our run, we sort of demonstrated him as being not complete trash, to put it lightly, I guess. As you said, like the Veloria overgassing. What did she end up in, like S tier or something stupid?
She ended up in A. She didn't get a runoff poll though.
Jesus Christ. We'll get to Gen 2 in a bit, but that's where things start getting really messy.
Oh, you want to talk about Gen 2? I have a lot more to say about Ophelia than I do about Odin.
I don't remember where Ophelia ended up, but I'm sure you have it burned into your memory. It's the traumatic canon event.
She ended up exactly where I would place her, just not for the reasons that I would put her there.
Before we move on to Gen 2, I do want to draw attention not to something that's on the list, but something that's absent. Oh, actually, before that, let's talk about the late servants.
Yeah, let's talk about the servants, especially Jacob, because I think they're kind of, when it comes to unit discussion, there kind of ends up being a lot more that people have to say about Jacob than Felicia, whether it be positive or negative. Because Felicia is just generally kind of a bit more straightforward, I think. But yeah, you want to talk about like late servant first?
Well, a few things to say about early servant. I don't really have much to say about the early servants. There was some like reclassing discourse that happened, especially on the Jacob poll. But I did see people advocating for like spend your first heart seal on Bow Knight Felicia, and then heart seal her back into maid later, and it's like,
okay, well that's silly.
My response to that is the same response we had to, what was it? Who did we talk about?
Shura.
Oh, Shura, where it's like 2 heart seals early on is a big cost. But only it's bigger because it's one of the first 2 heart seals too, which like, I guess we'll start with early servants because I do want to talk about how the first 2 heart seals, I feel like people look at the first 2 heart seals as if they are separate from the first 5 heart seals, when deciding like who are the heart seal candidates. And to an extent, I can understand that, because if you demand, like if you're a unit like Mozu, right, who demands one of the first 2 heart seals in order to be functional, that is a much bigger cost than someone like Silas, who wants one of the first 5 heart seals.
Yes.
But the arguments that often came up with Jacob was like, well, I don't want to use the first 2 heart seals on any of the units who joined prior to Chapter 10. And as such, spending one of those heart seals on Jacob is free. And I would disagree with that because it's still one of the first 5 you have, the only 5 you have before Chapter 20. Which is in of itself like a big cost. Like there's a lot of units who want to use a heart seal before Chapter 20. Xander is a big one, but Corin usually wants to heart seal, although she can friendship. Silas, as we mentioned. Elise and Mozu for the early ones. Laszlo, potentially. Baruka, definitely. Selena, if you're doing the Rallybot build, although I don't love that for her.
Yeah.
Leo, but he can usually wait.
Yeah, Odin, if you want to use Ophelia, Or obviously, Ophelia can still be useful without passing down Vantage, but I think if you want to make full use of Ophelia, then you're giving one to Odin.
Mm-hmm. Nyx, if you want to use her, probably the high invest build is the best way to do it. Gunter, not necessarily, but he has quite a good selection to choose from as far as being like a forceful partner pair up.
Yep.
Obviously level 36 Azura. Smile.
Danny, people are gonna think we're serious.
We're not serious.
It's like when we mentioned Berserker Azura on stream.
I need to be careful. But we talked about Maid Charlotte. Like, again, it's not something I think is great, but it is, a contender, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot more than 5 contenders. Let's put it that way. And
that's just the Gen 1 units. Like, if you early recruited Gen 2 units, some of them also care about heart sealing.
Yeah, true. But even outside of that, it's not just the heart seal cost if you're doing Paladin or Great Knight on Jacob. It's also the fact that you get arguably a worse early game team.
Yeah.
I think that what you get out of Paladin or Great Knight Jacob is essentially a second Silas, who takes a little bit less effort because
he's gonna have friendship.
Yeah, he's gonna have more than strength and defense than Silas, but then Vow of Friendship, it kind of negates that lead. But, and also, worse weapon ranks, than Silas, because he has E in both, but, essentially what you're getting is a second Silas, in a lot of ways. Which sounds really good, because Silas is really good early on, but, you're also losing out on one of your staffers, which is not a huge deal. I think if you're doing Troubadour release, that doesn't really matter. I don't think you want more than one staffer early on. But if you're doing Wyvern release, that's a big deal, and more importantly, you're losing out on your only dagger unit until Kaze. And that's a pretty big deal.
You forgot about instant promote Maid Effie.
What about instant promote Maid Effie?
You forgot about it.
That I did. And I'm going to continue to forget about it.
No, I agree with you. I agree that I think having a dagger unit is a better resource than having another paladin. Or I guess another cavalier, because Silas isn't a paladin yet.
Right. Yeah,
And that's why you spend the first heart seal to get elbow room and defender, and the second heart seal to go back into butler. In this essay.
Certainly are some choices.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, I think, the other thing I wanted to bring up in regards to Early Servant is the discussion around, their unique gimmick of getting promoted skills early.
Yes.
Because that was sort of part of the thing with Jacob, is a lot of people bringing up the fact that he can get level 15 skills so early. And that is something that is a lot stronger in concept than it is in practice, at least in the context of Conquest.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, Jacob does not actually get any new classes through friendship in Conquest. He's a Benny archetype.
Benny archetype.
He only gets Cavalier through his friendships, which he already has. So, the level 15 skills available to Jacob are Tomebreaker, Inspiration, Armored Blow, Aegis, and then whatever he gets from his marriage. And honestly, that's not a great lineup. Inspiration's a good skill, but Jacob does not perform well as a strategist. And if you want an early inspiration unit, you'd rather be using early Felicia.
Especially because it
can
stacks
be
with
useful.
Damascene, which is usually better than Chintalome.
Yeah, Tomebreaker can be useful, but you also have some units like Kaze who just have good res, and
Well, and Jacob has good res at base.
Oh yeah, he does, but
like,
that's
he's already good against mages. Tonebreaker makes him better, but
yeah, well, but that's also outside of the scope of like using one of the early heart seals and like stuff. You're just keeping him in Butler. Aegis is not good.
Yeah, don't use Aegis.
Armored Blow is better than Aegis, but like still more niche.
It's a weird skill because like I think it's bad, but I think it's better than people give it credit for, even though it's bad.
Yeah, I would agree. But so you don't have a great lineup of level 15 skills. So the only thing that you're actually looking at is what does he get through marriage? And there are some nice options. You can do Elise, Baruka, or Camilla to get like trample. You could do like say like Mozu or like anyone who has like a single weapon type class. You can get like a fair skill. Although actually, I think in Conquest that's like just sniper and berserker. I guess sorcerer, but don't do sorcerer, Jacob.
Again, that's another one reserved for Felicia.
Right. Yeah, so like he has some options like bow fair or like trample or something, but it sounds impressive that like, oh, he can stack a bunch of level 15 skills, but in practice, the ones that he actually gets access to, the only really useful ones are actually going to be like whatever he gets from his marriage, and that's kind of it.
It is worth noting that getting Wyvern from Elise is a relatively unique, in fact, entirely unique niche. Sorry, Effie. No matter what the wiki says, you can't get Wyvern from Elise. Can I fucking say, I had a fucking flashback to 6 years ago when I played Conquest on hardware, and I got the Elise Effie friendship because the wiki said it gave Wyvern, and it didn't give Wyvern. And so I edited the article, and then my fucking workplace IP got banned for vandalism. Because they didn't believe me.
That is incredible.
It's apparently been fixed since then, but
that's a certified fandom moment.
That was not the fandom wiki. That was the .org wiki. That was when I got black-pilled.
Oh, jeez.
I got black-pilled. I don't care about fixing wikis anymore. I just vandalize them now for real.
Based.
But yeah, it is kind of unique that he gets it, or not just kind of, it is literally unique that he gets Wyvern from Elise. And if you're doing the Wyvern spam teams, that I've heard a couple of people say, like, you know, the Conquest support system is great because it's a puzzle to see how many people you can get Wyvern. Well, then Jacob Elise is a solution to that puzzle, but I would argue, in a similar vein to Three Houses, not just coming down to Wyvern spam, Wyvern is a good class, but it's not most units' best class.
Yeah.
It's probably Jacob's best class, just because, like, what else is he doing?
Well, what else is he doing is what I think you should be doing, which is staying in Butler. But
yes. I meant for long-term, because I don't like him long-term in Butler, but I like him short-term in Butler.
Yeah.
If you're trying to go long-term, I do think, like, marrying Elise or Corrin, which is, you know, it's a fast support, and you get the C support and Branch of Fate, but that's also a one-of-a-kind, very powerful resource that you're committing to this unit.
Yeah, and Corrin gets Troubadour out of it, which they usually don't want, so...
Although I think Corrin getting a bad class from their marriage is less of a big deal, because they can get 80 bajillion good classes through friendship. Like, Corrin can still get Wyvern through a fast friendship with Camilla. Because if you're marrying Jacob, you're female Corrin. So, like, you get fast friendship with Camilla. You get Archer from Mozu. That's also one of the best classes in the game. You get Sorcerer from Nyx. It does require fielding Nyx for 7 maps, but, like, you know, there's worse things.
Yeah, 5 maps, because you just get a...
Oh, yeah, it's friendship, right, not marriage, yeah.
Not the worst.
Brain fart.
So yeah, that's a fair
from
point.
Charlotte. Like, there's a lot of good options.
But yeah, I think that's all we kind of had to say about early Servant. Early Jacob, really.
Late Servants... This actually ties into the other thing I wanted to talk about, with the D tier being just straight up empty. the point where I realized no one was gonna get put in D tier was when late Jacob made C on the back of people coping that his access to level 15 skills as a late servant meant he could do some unique stuff, which, like, technically is true. He can still get inspiration. And, like, the only other unit at that point who's likely to have inspiration is Felicia.
But then also you have early Felicia, so why don't you just do it with Felicia?
And as late Jacobs, like early Jacob, you can knock out a marriage pretty quickly. Especially Corrin, because it's a fast support that you already have C on. But even Elise, you can get Wyvern Jacob pretty quickly. If for some reason you want to get, like, General to combine Aegis and Pavise, like for a Mimi build, like, he can start working on the Effie marriage immediately. If you want Tome Fair, he can start working on Nyx pretty quick. If you want Bow Fair, he can start working on Mozu pretty quick. Like, those are all wives available to him quite early.
I also just realized I misspoke earlier. Sorcerer doesn't get Tome Fair, that's
that's Omnioji. Yeah. That's Omnioji. He has to marry Izana.
That's true.
But, like, late Jacob is 7 maps away from a relevant level 15 skill. And he joins in Chapter 16.
Yeah. He's, and with quite poor stats.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he can go Strategist for Inspiration, but,
Because, again, that's one of 5 seals. Like, that's one of 5 early seals. Do you really want to use that on fucking Jacob?
Well, and also, if you want to use it for early inspiration, Felicia has been around longer. She's probably going to be higher leveled. She has better magic for actually doing things in Strategist. Like, there's no reason to do it with Jacob over Felicia.
I think a lot of people, again, like you say, the 15 skills seem good in a vacuum, but I think a lot of people don't use Late Servant, because, like, why would you, right? Especially when it comes to Jacob. Like, Felicia, we used her to sort of support up Leo.
Yeah.
But, like, I have to imagine some number of people are just like, well, you know, level 15 skills still, it can't be that bad. But it kind of is.
Yeah. He, really is, and in terms of, like, physical dagger unit, it's like, come on. You have Kaze. Kaze's just gonna be better in him than, like, every single way, basically.
We were just dunking on Shura for his, like, Soul Ninja build not being particularly good, but you get Shura 1 chapter later than late Jacob, and if you immediately reclass him to Ninja, forget Soul Ninja, just immediately reclass him to Ninja, he's a better dagger unit than late Jacob.
That too, yeah. So, yeah. Late Jacob really just does not have anything going for him. I also think he's one of the worst units in the game. Late Felicia, I think, is better. Not so much for staffing, because, like, the staffing formula, like the healing formula, there's only actually a very slight difference in terms of, like, healing between the two.
Well, staff accuracy cares about your magic, though.
Yeah, staff accuracy, it matters a bit more, and then, because Late Servant joins with, C in both their weapon types, like, Felicia can just use the Flame Shuriken immediately, and she's not gonna have, like, amazing damage, but it's gonna be better than Late Jacob using a physical dagger.
Yes.
And she's gonna have more speed. Like, her performance on their join map, Chapter 16, is actually, like, not bad. And sort of like you pointed out with our playthrough, she joins right after Leo, who's one of her best pairings. So, like, I don't think Late Felicia's, like, a great unit, but she's definitely in a better place. And I think Seeker is more fitting for her.
And she can do, like, bare minimum, the dedicated combat unit thing, or dedicated backpack unit thing, where her combat is not so terrible that she can't take the front on specific, like, against specific enemy groups.
Yeah.
Or just, like, switch to the front to, like, hey, I don't want to deploy a staffer. Well, that's okay. Leo's backpack can heal people on the turns where I need healing.
Yeah.
Which is what we ran into, like, on quite a few situations. Like, well, I don't really feel like deploying a staffer, like, until, I guess, Laszlo was in Falco at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it's also worth noting, if you care about like late game staffers, like in the last third of the game, Flora and Izana are also not great units, but they're going to be better than late Jacob.
Absolutely. Flora, because she's got better staff accuracy, and also, while a trained up late Jacob would probably have a higher staff rank than her at base, that requires using late Jacob for a point in the game, like, where you don't want to be doing that.
Well, you say better. Jacob joins a C 4 chapters before Flora, who joins a B.
Oh right, I
They'll
forgot.
probably have about the same.
I forgot Conquest gives you her at like a reasonable time.
Yeah.
Rev chapter 23, fucking bullshit.
Yeah. Rev Flora, ugh, don't even talk about it. But
yeah, I think one of the big advantages to Flora is she just has B rank staves. At a point where you get a couple of extra deployment slots. And if you don't have anyone better to spend them on, you can spend them on her and Izana. Like, Rally Magic plus B-rank staff girl.
yeah, like, I would also probably put Flora in D, but she's definitely better than late Jacob.
Should we talk about the D tier, though? Because I did want to, like, it ended up empty in Generation 1. It does fill out with a couple of units as we get later down the line, but so many just sort of really unimpressive people ended up dodging the D tier allegations. And I think part of that comes down to, I see this narrative about, like, oh, the floor for Conquest units is C, and then comparing them to bad units from games past. The ones I always bring up are Sophia and Wendy, but even things like, Fiona Radiant Dawn or Rolf Path of Radiance. Who's another traditionally bad unit? Shanam, FE5, like those sorts of people, right?
Too.
Yeah.
I had to bring him up.
The iconic.
Carla.
Yeah, a lot of the free silvers in 11 and 12. And those units are significantly worse than the worst units in Conquest. I would even say, like, the bad units in Birthright and Rev are worse than the worst units in Conquest.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the amount of resources you have to pour into them to make them functional members of your team. But
for sure, like, Rev Niles is definitely a lot worse than, like, Conquest Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is definitely a mentality that a lot of people have, not just for Conquest, basically for, I kind of want to say Awakening Onward, that is sort of a mentality that a lot of people have.
Or any of the games considered, like, easy or balanced strong casts.
Yeah, like Sacred Stones.
I've already seen, we just started a Sacred Stones tier list recently, and I've already seen the arguments of, like, everyone deserves to be A tier because it's an easy game.
Yeah, and that argument, it kind of just falls flat just for the simple fact that the whole purpose of the tier list is to compare units to one another within the same game. And so, even if, say, late Jacob is better than Sophia from FE6, it's like, okay, cool, but Sophia from FE6 isn't in this game. Like, we are comparing units to one another, and D tier does not mean... D tier in Conquest does not have to mean the same thing in, like, D tier in any other game.
And even in those older games, I think there's oftentimes a sentiment of, like, this unit cannot be bad because I beat the game with them. Because not only I beat the game with them, like, I wasn't soft-locked for deploying them, but, like, they were a core part of my team, and I got use out of them. And I would say that, like, if you know what you're doing, it's easy enough to drag whomever from the Scrub Squad into endgame. Like, I have a video on my channel of Wendy killing Idun, with the triangle attack, like, just the armor bros. I I used Sophia as my primary warper in a playthrough. I've used Carla to solo the Value of Life chapter. Like, you can do funny stuff with bad units. But at the end of the day, you've got, 14 deployment slots? If we're ordering the list in terms of, like, who makes the best use of them, you know, I don't care how much of a cool Benny build you've got. He's generally going to be worse than someone like Kaze.
Yeah. Yeah, and also there's the idea that, like, nobody's D tier, even if we're only comparing Conquest units to Conquest units, the idea that nobody's D tier because D tier means, like, unusable, right? And it's like, that is not what D tier has to mean. At the end of the day, the amount of tiers on a tier list and what they are labeled is completely arbitrary, and D does not have to mean, like, horrible, unusable trash. It just, in the context of a list like this, all it means is just worse than the units in the above tiers. And so the idea that there can't be any D tier units in Conquest because they all have a floor, it's like, well, you know, there's nothing saying that D tier units can't be a core member of your team.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we set up the criteria of the list to be, you know, these are the 5 tiers that we're using. Even if you would label the tiers differently, I think making use of all of them is, yeah, it conveys more information than leaving one empty. Because it further delineates the units from each other. If everyone's just, like, clumped together in the same tier, it kind of doesn't say anything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that, like, you know, there is a noticeable difference in, I mean, if we're just talking about, like, the late servants, like, I think there's a notable difference between late Jacob and late Felicia. And even though late Jacob, you can make him do stuff, putting them in the same tier communicates less information about the two, not more.
Yes. And in case anyone is wondering, the C tier, like, mystery boy and singer girl, I think her name is Layla, that is late Jacob and late Felicia. I don't think we communicated that earlier, but that is who those are.
Yeah. I think that's about it for Gen 1. Again, like, there's some other, like, placements that are a bit different between my list and, you know, like, sort of what we think and, like, the community one, but those are sort of the main ones that we kind of wanted to talk about, unless I'm forgetting something.
Okay, well, we were talking about this off camera, but you said you want to start Gen 2 off strong with two fan favorite children.
Oh boy. Yeah, so two of the there's Gen 2 definitely has some more questionable placements than Gen 1.
Yeah, this is where we start getting a little unhinged.
Yeah. I think the main one, though, that two of the main ones that stick out to me are Kana and Midori ending up in B tier. Now, most of the kids ended up in B tier. However, I don't think that all of them are necessarily unfitting to be there. But Kana and Midori stick out to me because they are, in my mind, two of the worst units in the game. And as you can see in my list that includes Gen 2, I have them both in D. Now,
Blue, Midori gets you infinite money.
Alright, yeah, well, okay, well, we gotta talk about it, so let's talk about it. Midori... okay. Midori can give you some money, because personal skill increases the chance of Profiteer by 20%.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with this is twofold. One, obviously you don't have Midori for the whole game, and you don't have Spendthrift for the whole game. So it's only after you recruit her and after you get her to level 5 promoted that she even starts making you money.
Yes.
Two is that the amount of money that she makes you is also not a lot. Partly because gold bars only give 3,000 gold, or 300 gold. God, if it was 3,000,
that'd be worth it.
If it was 3,000, I'd be putting Midori up in A tier or something. Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
300 gold.
Think of
per
all
gold
of
bar.
the Eternal Seals you could buy.
Yeah, exactly.
Level 40 Leo incoming.
All those +7 bronze weapons that you definitely need. It's only 300 gold per gold bar, which would be a lot if she generated you a lot of them, but it's only the first 7 turns of battle, which you might be finishing some maps in under 7 turns. But even if we just assume that like you take 7 or more turns every map, her luck is gonna cap out at around 30 in merchant. And keep in mind that's a little variable based on the parent, but
let's be generous and say it's a 50-50 chance though. Like it's not, but for the purposes of like easy calculation, because
right,
the +20 from her personal.
But that's also, she's not gonna have that much right away unless you feed her like all the goddess icons.
Yeah, well, I mean, what else are you doing with them? You need to get gold from goddess icons. The only way to do that is to give them to Midori.
Right, yeah, it's not like
archetype.
you could sell a goddess icon for 1,000 gold and like 3
Not possible,
gold bars
no.
and change. Yeah, so yeah, it's, if you give her all your goddess icons, she's gonna cap at 30 luck, around 30, and then her personal skill brings that up to around 50. And I guess if you want, you can use Rally Luck from Izana in the last, like, 6 chapters of the game or whatever to...
Shrine Maiden Talon Corrin? You fucking throwing or something? Like,
So
don't wait
true.
for Izana. Shrine Maiden... That's also how she gets Miracle, by the way, which I saw way more posts about than I should have in the comment section. I.e. more than 0, but I saw, like, easily a dozen Miracle Midori covers. And I don't know how to respond to that, because I think we are approaching this game in such a fundamentally different way that nothing I say will convince you Miracle Midori is bad. Like, don't hinge on a % chance to not die. Just put her in a position where she doesn't die.
Also, it's 1 attack, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
it'll save you from 1 attack, but not any more than that.
Mhm.
So,
At most.
yeah,
At most 1 attack.
yeah, at most.
And again, if we're being generous, it's a 50% chance. Like, I'm not doing a coin flip as to whether or not I reset the map.
Yeah, so... Yeah, if we assume, like, 50-50 chance to get a gold bar every turn, and you're getting 1, and it's 7, the first 7 turns of a map, you are getting, on average, 3.5 gold bars a map, which is, 1,500 gold, per map. Which, again, this is after you recruit Midori and after you get to level 5 in Merchant.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not like, there's still some of the game left, obviously, but it's not like across the whole game. It's across, like, however much of the game you have left after that point.
For context, if you're getting her there via an Offspring seal, I believe it's chapter 20 is the first one where she offsprings directly into Profiteer. You can...
It's after you beat chapter 20, so chapter 21 would be...
Yeah, that's... sorry, I say the chapter you just beat rather than the one you're on, and I should say the one you're on because it's so much, like, easier communication style.
Right. But yes, that is correct.
After you beat 20, then she would offspring into Profiteer. Granted, you don't have to offspring her into Profiteer. You can... You know, I mean, Kaze's not an early joiner, but he's not so late that you can't, like, early recruit Midori and Master Seal her up, but then you spend a Master Seal on her. That itself is a gold investment, which means that you're going to need more Profiteer procs before you break even.
Right. And yeah, so ultimately it's like a little over 1,000 gold a map. That's not a lot for a unit who is otherwise not doing much because her stats are pretty bad. Bows are a good weapon type, but again, similarly to what we talked about with Shura earlier, there's so many other better bow options. Midori being like your 6th best bow unit is really not a good place to be.
And she can't even claim to be a fast bow unit, because she's actually pretty slow by bow unit standards.
Yeah, she's actually pretty slow. You could make her a dagger unit, but that's a heart seal. If you're also getting Profiteer, you heart seal her into Mechanist, and then also, she's still going to be probably a worse dagger unit than your other candidates.
Yeah. And she does probably, I talked about, like, don't go Mechanist. She does probably want to go Mechanist because she keeps the bow rank. And, like, also her stats need the boost.
Yeah. So, yeah, she's not great.
There is the
amount of money, like, go ahead.
I was gonna say, there is the Cope build. It's not Cope build, it's probably the best way to use her, but it's far from unique. Where you just, like, ultra late recruit her, so she gets multiple damage stacking skills, like Spendthrift through the Offspring Seal, and you can pass down, one from her mother, and Kaze technically has life and death access, although that is 4 levels and a Heart Seal of investment into him, in a class that he doesn't, like, super benefit from.
Yeah.
He likes Vantage, but he doesn't like the other Master of Arms skills.
Well, and also I believe if you're doing that, you also need to arm scroll Midori.
Right,
to get to A
she
bow.
doesn't get Brave. Well, you can train her on map, because she gets, like, B and 3/4 or something, if you're doing the final map. So, like, you can train on map. It's not like Midori Paralog is, like, super hard to train a weak unit on.
Yeah.
In fact, it's one of the paralogs that I think you should do, like, class dipping on, if you're doing, like, class dipping units to get skills in classes they aren't super competent in.
Yeah. But yeah, the problem with that also is that it is far from unique to Midori.
Mm-hmm.
Other kids can do it. Percy's like a good example.
Yeah, Percy's the big standout.
But even then, there's a number of Gen 1 units who are quite nice who can also do it. Mozu is one of the standouts due to having so many damage boosting things in her base kit. Corrin, obviously, because the Yato piercing through dragon skin.
Well, and also they have the most class access of anyone. Like, not just in that you can pick their talent, but also they can friendship for, like, 5 damage boosting skills.
Yeah. Effie and Camilla, just for being very high strength units who, are very available. So it's far from unique to her. And also if you're doing that, like, okay, cool, she's around for endgame, and, like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's not contribution. Like, that's not a lot of contribution at all.
I think the main thing people gas her up on, though, is the gold bars. Which is why, like, I made a point in my playthrough, the streamed one that we did together, to make very poor financial decisions. We bought the Bolt Axe a map before we benched Elise. We bought Heart Seals for multiple units that just did not continue long term. We failed to get a Master Seal on the Shura map, so we had to buy one. Just a lot of very, very poor financial decisions.
We bought both of the arm scrolls in the final shop to sink into Flora.
Yep, we bought both arm scrolls to sink into Flora. We had the Brave Axe on Camilla, and then Camilla died, and we never had another Brave Axe user, and we never sold it. I also didn't sell the Bolt Axe. And I never visited Lilith, and the reason I never visited Lilith is because, Lilith gives more gold than Midori does over the course of an average playthrough.
Over the course of an entire playthrough, yeah.
Yeah. And even without Lilith's help, like forget without Midori's help, without Lilith's help, I was able to afford not only to make these poor financial decisions, but also to do some expensive things that were not poor decisions. Like we made ourselves a Rallybot, we made ourselves a couple of, we used Ophelia and Soleil pretty extensively class dipping them. We class dipped Keaton a couple of times, and none of that comes cheap. And part of why, like, the Midori cope thing confuses me is it feels like, what are you spending this money on? Because I feel like at the same time as people gassing up all of the gold bars that Midori gives you, that we didn't need to do some medium investment to high investment builds, when you talk about any unit even getting a medium amount of investment, suddenly that's way too much. That's way too much effort and money to spend on them. Which makes me wonder, like, what are we spending the Midori gold bars on if it's not extra seals, extra forges? Like, what are we...
Yeah, well, and also, like, the idea that, because, like you said, we made a bunch of poor financial decisions and we're still able to afford a lot. Conquest is not a game where money is sparse. The game says, like, on the Branch of Fate, that Conquest has a limited amount of gold. And that is true, because what it's referring to is the fact that, Birthright and Revelations have skirmishes. So,
yes.
Conquest gold is limited, but, limited does not mean, rare.
And in a no-grind context, isn't it the most plentiful of the three routes in terms of gold and free things given? Birthright might be better.
I think Birthright maybe... Yeah, it's closer to Birthright than you would think, and Rev is... although Rev, you also get a ton of stuff you can just sell, so there's that too, but... Conquest, you get quite a bit of gold, and I think in terms of what people are spending their money on, where they feel like money is tighter than it is, I think some people go really crazy on forges, maybe like more than they need to, with like a bronze, a bunch of like bronze +3 or iron +2 or something.
But do the gold bars even help you get there? Like, I mean, maybe not spending any money on seals gets you there, but like...
Yeah, like if you feel like seals are too much of an investment, so you're not spending a lot on seals, and you're just spending a lot on like weapons for forges, then yeah, you can do it. Because, like I said, like Midori's making you an average of like a little over 1,000 per map, so that's enough for 1 iron or 2 bronzes. So if you're spending like that, we also did the Percy paralogue and played it for the money.
That's true. I guess you could skip that. Like, that was the one thing that I did right financially. But it also wasn't hard. Like,
yeah, we also played Chapter 16, like, kind of slow.
Yeah, well, I had a faster plan, but then, like, I scuffed it by giving the dual clip to Percy, and then because of that, we spent, like, 2 extra turns trying to figure out how to get the Master Seal that we didn't get, with no benefit.
Yeah, so yeah, there's that. There's also, like, if you're, I think more gung-ho about spending on tonics, because if you're just like, oh, I'm gonna buy strength, speed, and defense for everyone on every map, like, yeah, okay, that's... You're sinking a lot of gold into that, but if you're, like, being more deliberate about your choice in terms of, like, when you buy tonics and what they're for, that really shouldn't be a problem. And, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, like, if you use Midori to get gold bars, then you're not gonna get use out of that money. Like, you can always spend the money on something, you know. It's just more so that there's other ways to get a lot more money, and I think if you're being smart with your spending, then, it is certainly not a B tier level contribution.
But Kana is, right? Because she's a second Korin.
Kana. Now, you see, Kana is a different story. So Kana... I'm trying to remember, what did people even say about Kana? I actually forget.
Just a second Corrin. Like,
just
mostly
second.
just a second Corrin. I can pull up the post real quick if you want me to, but mostly just second Corrin. One of the big things was, like... I remember a couple of people bringing up... Sorry about that. Had to cut real quick. What I was saying is, I'm pulling up the Kana post now, but one of the big arguments that I saw, that I remember seeing a couple of people bring up, is that Corrin isn't using the Dragonstone anymore because it's, like, the Dragonstone stops being good. So Dragonstone Plus and Dragonstone are Kana exclusive items, which isn't even, like, true, because Corrin can use it if you want to, but also, the reason Corrin stopped using it is because it's bad at this point in the game. So, like, what are we doing with the Dragonstone Plus late game?
Yeah, like, if you stopped using it on Corrin because it's bad, then Kana using it would not be good. The thing is, so Kana, theoretically, Kana is one of the most flexible kids, because obviously Corrin's talent, you can make it whatever you want, and then Kana gets that as well, and then Corrin can marry whoever they want, and so in theory it sounds like, okay, Kana can do a lot of different things. Kana's circumstances, I would argue, probably makes them one of the least flexible kids, at least in terms of practical usage. Nor Prince/Princess is not a good class beyond the early game. Because like we mentioned with the Dragonstone, right?
Yeah.
And so Corrin can escape it using a friendship seal, like we talked about before, or a partner seal. Which, you know, Corrin's always going to be able to partner seal if Kana exists. But Kana, obviously, like, Gen 2 supports, like, that's going to come online rather late, comparatively. And that means that if Kana wants to escape Nor Prince or Princess, which they do, they want to use a heart seal. So already bad start on that front.
Yeah,
but
assuming it's before Chapter 20, like, you've only got 5 of them.
Yeah. But then there's also the problem of, Kana's stats are rather unimpressive. Granted, they seem worse at first glance than they actually are, just because, again, their class is not great. If you reclass them into a better class, they are going to have better stats. But they're still going to be overall worse than whatever Corrin or Corrin's spouse is doing. So you're spending a resource to get a worse version of whatever they're doing, who also comes later. And that is not a great place to be at all.
Yeah, I don't really know what the logic was for Kana B, because looking over the comments, actually all of them say Kana's bad, Kana's the worst unit in the game. If Kana's not D tier, nobody's D tier. This one says Dragon Fang good. I can't tell if that's a joke or not. What if Corrin had no niche? Pretty flexible unit. So I guess the flexibility and Dragon Fang are like the positives people brought up.
I mean,
other than that, and I mean, I guess it makes sense that the people who would comment would be the ones, like, a lot of comments are like, wait, what do you mean she's not in D tier? I'm surprised by these results. Whereas I think you're more likely to comment if you're surprised by the results, right? So, didn't get a bunch of comments like, I agree with these results.
Yeah, it's the same thing with, like, there's a couple other units. We're gonna get to them later. Rallyman's a big one. Where it's like, almost all the comments are like, why is Rallyman in A/S tier?
Best unit in the game, baby! Best unit in the game, baby!
Alright, we'll talk about that. We gotta talk about a different bad unit first. But yeah, Kana, you could argue that maybe D is a little too harsh on them. simply because like they can be very available. You are always going to pair off Corrin. There's no reason not to. So
they're not always going to be available. What if I marry Niles as a dude?
Does installing Gay Fates make it so that Kana's born when you marry Niles?
Probably.
Then you install Gay Fates, baby. So yeah, you could argue maybe D tier's a little unfair. I would put them in D personally. At the very least, I think B tier is far too generous.
I think the D tier argument is fair because the idea is like, yeah, this unit can work if you do stuff to them, but it's like we were talking about with like the empty D tier moment where you still only have 14 deployment slots. Like, what is Kana doing for you that you don't have 14 better units? I mean, more than 14 better units doing.
Yeah.
And I say 14 deployment slots, that's the end of the game. If we're early recruiting Kana, then that means Kana needs a Master Seal. That means Kana's competing for tighter deployment slots on tighter maps. Like,
yeah. Slight correction, late game, end of the game is 15 to 16 deployment slots in Conquest.
Oh, true, yeah.
You're too rev filled.
Well, you know, I only play good games.
Oh, hush. But yeah, Kana, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, now that you put it like that, yeah, D tier actually is quite fair for them, I think.
Because Kana's sort of like the catch-22 of if you grab them late, they auto-level in Nor Noble, which doesn't do much for them in terms of weapon ranks unless you're going in a sword class, which you're probably not, and doesn't do much for them in terms of stats because it doesn't have like the best growths. It's like balanced growths or whatever. But if you recruit them early, then they need one of the early heart seals to be functional, and they're going to require a master seal, which I know that, I guess this branches into a broader thing with the children, where I know a lot of people only late recruit the kids because then you get an offspring seal instead of a master seal, and I understand, especially if you're like tight on deployment slots early. Like I put off Ophelia for a while, and that was a mistake. But I do think if you want a kid to be like a core part of your team, especially multiple kids supporting each other, the option to recruit them early isn't like terrible. But it does mean like that's an extra seal that you wouldn't have to spend from late recruiting them, which it just feels like in Kana's case, you're either like you're suffering either way. You're either early heart sealing them or you're late recruiting them and then struggling with like bad weapon ranks, bad stats.
Yeah. There's also the fact that if you're doing physical pairing for Corrin, like if Kana's other parent is physical, then like auto leveling tomes with an offspring seal is not good.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, that's Nor Noble.
Yeah. Yeah, I said swords. I guess technically tomes also. The fact that tomes is the secondary weapon means that in order to auto level tomes to a point where they're not just like Ian some change, you have to get pretty late in the game. Which is why I pointed to swords as the thing that I think is generally more relevant auto-leveled. Like, you can reasonably get, like, C or B swords if you're trying to do, like, a Swordmaster Kana, I guess?
Yeah.
Paladin Kana, Bow Knight Kana. For some reason, you care about the swords, not the bows.
Yeah, I don't know.
Hero actually cares about swords.
Yeah, Hero would be alright.
Great Knight.
Paladin. Everyone knows Paladin's the best class.
Yeah, just Dark Mage Kana marries Odin to become 11 Sword Beast. Or, you know, you marry Odin. Dark Mage Corrin marries Odin to make Kana 11 Sword Samurai. Yeah.
You wouldn't get Samurai,
Oh, wait,
though.
no, because you do Parallel Class, because Odin passes down... Yeah, Odin passes down Dark Mage, and then Corrin would pass down Omnioji. Oh, that's so cringe. Kana can't even do anything right.
Yeah. There's a reason you made the your Rev Kana video the title and thumbnail.
Yeah, and that video will be out by the time this list comes out, so if you want, like, more thoughts on Kana, that is specifically in Rev, but Kana doesn't change much between routes, I'll be real. Kana's basically everything applies the same. The bigger thing is that, like, in Rev, Kana has more parent options, and that doesn't fix them. There's another unit who struggles with auto-leveling weapons, though. Non-stone weapons. Actually worse at leveling non-stone weapons than Kana, and that's Veloria. Who I do think is better than Kana. Like, we're just using that as a segue.
Substantially.
However, I would not say that Veloria is substantially better than Soleil. And this is another one where, like, on the Veloria and Soleil polls, some people said, like, streamer bias, and Veloria did perform very well in our stream series, right?
Yes.
But
so did Soleil.
And, like, I would argue Soleil was one of our, like, 3 best units going into the like, at the time that we had her. It's, like, Soleil, Leo... Yeah, Soleil, Leo. Like, who would be number 3? I guess Camilla before she died, maybe? Question mark? Like, they were our carries.
Like, Effie was pretty good.
Effie,
or not,
Mozu.
I mean, Effie was good.
Baller.
Mozu more so.
Mozu and Effie were baller as well, but they were not as, I guess it's not as impressive to be, like... I don't know whether it's, like, better or worse, but it definitely leads to less, like, impressive moments to be a player-phase delete button, and then, like, let me just throw Soleil in this bunch of enemies and they kill everything. Let me just put Leo
I would
in
argue,
this bunch of enemies and they kill everything.
Well, I would argue that that is a big part of why I think the disparity between Soleil and Veloria is a bit weird. So, Veloria, like, again, we mentioned it a little bit before when Keaton was brought up. We've definitely pushed back against, like, the sort of idea and narrative of one range lock making someone, like, completely terrible for combat. The way I sort of see Veloria is she is basically a stronger Keaton who joins later. And, like, I put Keaton in B tier, and I also put Veloria in B tier, because I think that, you know, her performance is not so much better that she is a tier above him, you know, given the fact that she joins later. And again, I do think that a one range locked unit can still be quite valuable with their high combat stats.
Oh, she doesn't have to be one range locked. I think Veloria has a much better time leaving Wolfsegner than Keaton does. Because she has an actual skill stat.
Yeah. But the Soleil comparison is, if you are leaving her in Wolfsegner, or even if you're going Berserker, a Ninja Soleil, which I do think is kind of the best way to use her, is ultimately gonna be just contributing more for you on any given map. Because, like, you know, Berserker does have 1-2 range with hand axe, but, like, or, like, Wyvern or something if you send her there, but, you know, that's still more limited than a really strong dagger unit. And so, while I do think having a very high-statted player phase unit is good to have, they're still doing less for you on any given map than a 1-2 range enemy phase juggernaut. And so while Valoria's stats are very impressive, I don't think it puts her a tier above Soleil, and I would personally, you know, on the community list, Veloria got A, so Soleil got B. I would personally swap the two.
Yeah. It kind of confused me, because, like, I know Veloria is one of the more popular children. And I think with good reason. I think she's, you know, at the very least, on the surface, one of the strongest, you know, without needing to put too much effort in. She's just a big ball of stats that has good class access at base, and can get better at class access with, like, the correct mom. And oftentimes she has a really good mom because Keaton makes such a good backpack for strong physical combat units like Camilla, that they just end up naturally together, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time,
And,
I
like-
thought Soleil was also a very popular one because she has such an easy pathing to Soul Ninja. Like, probably the easiest pathing in the game, tied with her father. Actually,
Yeah.
probably easier than her father, because she can Offspring Seal into Hero, and then just, like, not care about, like, Laszlo needs to spend 5 levels in Hero, bare minimum, and also probably some number in Mercenary if he wants to have actual stats.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. If I remember correctly, I feel like a lot of the comments said A.
Mhm.
I think, there is one downside to Soleil that I think is a real downside, but at the same time also kind of gets overplayed, which is her HP. Her HP is kind of below average, especially compared to some of the bulkier Soul Ninjas, sorry, like Silas or Baruka.
Well, Soul Mages fill the same role. Like, you can get Soul from Laszlo Friendship. And then like, pass it down to Ophelia if you need to.
And so, like, that is a real downside. With that being said, I also do think it is a bit overblown, because, like, she still does have a lot of good ways of stacking defense. Especially with some of her better moms, like Selena. And, her dad can pass down HP plus 5 if you're doing, like, rally build Laszlo. Which I don't think you're always doing. But, like, I think it is a good use of Laszlo, and so I do think it's reasonable that you would do that if you also wanted to use Soleil. And, there are still ways to circumvent it, to where, like, it is a real negative, but it's not a huge one.
An easy access to Shuriken Breaker, like, notably having the Mercenary variant as opposed to the Fighter variant. Like, Fighter variant would help with the HP problem by giving HP plus 5. But being able to dip into Bow Knight for Shuriken Breaker makes her ideal for the Ryoma map as well.
I guess there is Charlotte Mom, as well.
Is that gonna help her raw stats, though?
I mean, her strength and speed are already good, and it is gonna help her HP, because Charlotte does have a big HP growth. And she'll get HP plus 5. It'll hurt her defense and res the most, but it's honestly
those
it's
are fixable
probably
problems.
a pretty good mod for Soleil. It's just kind of an awkward Gen 1 pairing.
Well, and what's funny about that is if you're going the Offspring Seal route, then she just gets HP plus 5 at the same time that she goes Hero. Because she gets 5 levels.
Well.
And so she'll grab Gamble and HP plus 5, like get him out of the way.
Yeah.
So you can even have Charlotte pass something else down, which, like, I don't know what. Maybe she would go, like, get Strength plus 2 from Baruka or something?
Or Elbow Room from Perry.
Yeah, or Elbow Room from Perry.
You can do stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, Veloria, like, I think part of why she got A is just, like, you say the streamer bias. Again, I think if that were the case, Soleil would have ended up higher. I think part of it is just that, like, I talked a little bit about this in my, my Odin video that was mentioned earlier, but first impressions, I think, matter a lot for, like, perception of units in this franchise. And so Veloria's impression is big numbers.
Yes.
And, like, the big numbers matter. The big numbers help. I think a great example from our stream series was Chapter 22, the Hana map. Leo was, like, taking on, like, the entire left side, which is, like, enemy face rolling through a bunch of them.
Yes.
But then we ran into Hana, and Leo was doubling all the regular enemies, but he was definitely not doubling Hana. And Hana's pretty scary on that map. She's pretty intimidating, and
not if you've got Veloria.
Like, yeah, but not for Veloria, right? If it was just Leo sweeping that side, that would have been a problem. But because we had Veloria just one shot with, like, near 100% accuracy, and, that's a really good contribution. With that being said, it wasn't more of a contribution than what Leo and Soleil were doing.
It's more screenshotable. Because you just screenshot the battle forecast and you say, like, hey, scary enemy dead.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, with Leo, it'd be more like a video of him killing 10 people in a single enemy phase with no risk of death or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I like Veloria a lot. I think A is a little too generous.
Now, one of the things that we talked about in Gen 1 was the D tier was empty. And the D tier is no longer empty, which, makes sense. I do think, in general, a lot of people are more negative on the child units than the Gen 1 units, both because, like, lower availability, and some of them are, like, kind of unfortunate in that they join super late and they're already probably outclassed by a lot of people you have, so it's kind of like, why put in this effort? And because of that, I see why Ignatius ended up in D tier. Well, I can see why he would end up in D tier if you weren't the only one there, I guess.
Yeah.
Because Benny is not a particularly good unit. Benny is a unit that, like, if I were off the top of my head making a tier list, he would probably end up in D tier.
Yeah.
And you have to use Benny for 7 maps to get Ignatius, because he doesn't have any fast support, so you can't even be like, well, a shortcut and go only 6. Ignatius himself, I do think, it's actually funny you mentioned the first impressions, because he starts out in Armor Knight, and so I think he seems like he's just another Benny, and if you just spent 6 maps dragging Benny's stupid ass around, you'd be like, why the fuck do I want another one of these pieces of shit? But he has significantly better strength, and depending on his mother, he can also have, like, moderately better speed. Such that he doesn't end up in the Benny situation of, like, defense and nothing else.
Yeah. Especially if you give him a faster mom. Perry is my preferred. Because Perry genuinely appreciates the defense boost that Benny provides, and then also passes down quite good stats to Ignatius and, like, a good skill. But yeah, I think Ignatius has advantages over Benny that, like, definitely might not appear at first glance. Also, while he does have lower bulk than Benny, it's not that much lower, and his personal skill also helps boost his bulk as well.
Yeah, his personal skill. I actually saw a couple of people say, like, his personal skill is terrible. Which, his personal skill should never have a downside. Like, I don't like reducing things to, like, skill issue, but his personal skill gives him a buff if he's either paired up or in attack stance. And if you're not making use of the attack stance, guard stance in Fates, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't know what the approach to the game is, where Ignatius is constantly struggling to get Guarded Bravery. That's the name of it, right?
Yeah.
Guarded Bravery?
Yes, it's Guard Bravery. There is one situation where he might not, and I think it's kind of why people have this perception.
Yup.
And that is his paralog.
Can we talk about the paralog?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you talk about the paralog itself. All I'm gonna say is, it's not, Danny said it was explicitly not part of the criteria.
Yeah.
So, even if it was, like, the hardest map in the world, it should not have been factored in anyway, but...
Well, but people don't read the criteria. We learned this in the engage list. But... yeah, I the reason I said not to factor in, like, a child recruit map being quote-unquote hard is because that is going to vary pretty wildly depending on, like, person to person, what maps they find hard. I mentioned earlier, like, I find Ophelia's map nightmarish. I delayed it too long in my first Conquest playthrough, but even playing it earlier, like, it was definitely easier, but I still struggle with it. And then I played it in Rev, where I had access to, like, Ryoma and Xander, like, together, and all these super units, and even there I struggled on Ophelia's map, and I don't know what it is about Ophelia's map, but I personally find that to be the most difficult paralog, like, harder than Seigbert's, harder than Ignatius's, harder than the terrifying Mitama stationary berserkers. I find Ignatius's map to be piss easy. Like, I'm not even joking. I find Ignatius's map to be one of the easiest paralogs in the game. You just need to, like, the argument is like, oh, well, you need to get Benny over there before Ignatius gets killed by the ninjas and the mages. And you are on a timer. It's like I would say like a 5 to 7 turn timer, depending on how late in the game you are, how much they've auto-leveled. It does suck that Ignatius is green instead of blue. Like, if he could just use the Offspring Seal immediately, it would be a lot easier. But even as a, like, level 20 Armor Knight against promoted ninjas, the mages don't reach him for a while. Like, when the mages reach him, he dies.
Yeah.
But against the ninjas, he can survive a couple of rounds of combat. Well, depending on how much they've leveled or whatever. He can survive at least one round of combat, especially if you pass him down Wary Fighter, which it kind of sucks that you have to do that, but at the same time, I don't know what else Benny is passing.
Yeah.
Getting an Armor Knight halfway across the map is not that difficult in Fates. Like, this is the pair-up game. You probably have a flyer who can escort Benny. There's a Freeze Staff maid. Well, there's 2 of them on Lunatic. There's 2 Freeze Staff maids who get in the way, but even if you don't kill the Free Staff maids, you have enough movement to have Benny, or the flyer carrying Benny, like, go through the mountains and get to Ignatius fairly quickly. But also, you can just kill the Free Staff maids. Like, you can't silence them unless you put it off until after chapter 24. Or no, 25, well, right?
Right? Yeah, that's the thing that gets to me is like, oh, people will say that, like, oh, if you wait till the very end of the game, they, like, their stats are so high that they just kill him. And yeah, but also, if you're recruiting him that late, he's not really doing anything for you anyway.
Yeah.
Like, you're not recruiting him that late if you're actually gonna, like, use him for something.
But also, like, the easiest solution to the Freeze Staff is have a super unit kill the Freeze Staff. The idea behind 2 of them is, like, if you have someone kill the first Freeze Maid, they get frozen next turn, and they have to deal with a fairly, like, threatening group of mixed enemies. There's some physical and magical ones mixed in with each other. But if you have one super unit, like a Soul Ninja or a Soul Mage, they can handle a couple of enemy faces against these groups of enemies. If you have 2 super units, you kill both Freeze Maids on turn 1, or turn 2 more realistically, and then on turn 3 you can, like, pull back, and you don't have to be frozen there anymore. It's really not that, like, I don't think that's a super demanding thing for a Conquest team, because most teams are going to have at least one, possibly more than one, 1-2 range super unit. Like, we just talked about Soleil as a ninja, but hey, Silas, Kaze, Hero Xander, Odin and Leo. There's a lot of options for a 1-2 range enemy phase combat unit in Conquest. Just having one, like, if you don't have one on your team by the time you're recruiting children in the promoted paralogs, I feel like you're probably going to be struggling in the main campaign more so than in Ignatius's paralog.
Yeah. And, yeah, and in terms of himself as a unit, like, granted, I do not think he's great, just for the simple fact that, like, he does come quite late, and generally speaking, I don't want to field Benny for more than I have to.
I see what you did there, generally.
Yeah.
I would agree that Ignatius isn't, like, superb, and honestly, I wouldn't even think, like, him being in D tier was a problem if it weren't for the fact he's the only real unit who ended up there.
Yeah, other than, like, some of the capturables.
Yeah, I don't count them as real units.
True.
And, like,
and,
even if you're, like, really hesitant to put the Gen 1 units or whatever, like, Seigbert's right there. Seigbert's just worse than Iggy in almost every way. Like, he is Wyvern-based. With boo fucking who.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that, Seigbert is similarly unavailable, actually slightly less so, because Xander comes a little bit later than Benny.
Yeah.
And also, if you do want to factor paralog difficulty, I mean, in my opinion, Siegbert's is harder than Ignatius's.
I would say so.
Not like
still easier than
impossible or
Ophelia's.
anything, but-
Fuck Ophelia's paralog. I know I'm probably alone on that, but again, that's what I mean about the whole fucking
It's
why
subjective,
it's subjective thing.
Yeah, and so Seigbert, the only really other thing that he has over Ignatius is his personal skill helps him support other units better. Which,
Charlotte
like,
archetype.
oh my goodness. Like, it's not that Gallant doesn't matter. But it's basically just that, and the fact that he always has Wyvern, but he's similarly available very late, and is generally pretty unimpressive. And even if you do want to be a bit more generous to Seigbert and say that he's better than Ignatius, surely he's not 2 tiers better.
I know, it's not just a 1-tier gap. Like, he leapfrogged Dwyer.
Yeah, well, yeah, Seigbert in B is a little silly.
It feels to me, I know a number of people, like, don't use Gen 2 pretty heavily, and it feels to me, especially since, like, Seigbert comes so late, his paralog is pretty hard, maybe it's some amount of, like, well, Xander's a good unit, and this guy has Cavalier and Wyvern, he can't be that bad. B tier is about where, like, the average people go. Which, like, I don't even necessarily fault that logic if you haven't... Like, if you feel the need to vote on a unit you have no experience with. But I would question why you feel the need to vote on a unit you have no experience with.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would say that's pretty much the last placement that I think is egregious, like, just in and of itself. There is one other unit who we can talk about kind of briefly, who I think ended up in the right place, but maybe kind of for the wrong reasons. And that's Ophelia.
Yeah, everyone was talking about her, like, sorcerer build. Why the fuck didn't anyone go triple magic weapon Master of Arms? Like, Levin Sword, Bolt Naginata from, obviously, My Castle stuff, and Bolt Axe. Come on!
Yeah. You gotta, just give her an arm scroll. She can be a Nyx archetype.
She needs 4 arm scrolls. 1 for each arm. She can be Doc Ock.
No, I'm just imagining Ophelia with 3 arms, 1 for each magic weapon.
Why limit yourself? Put the Flame Shuriken in her inventory. If only bibliophile affected magic weapons. Really, I did see some bibliophile stuff get brought up, though. That was kind of amusing.
It was.
Do you want to talk about Ophelia? Because I don't have too much.
No,
I did not use her. I've used her like twice. Because fucking I hate that paralog.
Yeah, so I have Ophelia as my profile picture. Obviously, a unit I kind of like a lot. I would also put her in A tier, but she almost got S tier, actually, because she got a runoff poll that ran pretty close.
Yeah, I remember that now that you mention it. Focused around the one-shotting build, right?
Mostly, yeah. Well, so there's that. There's that aspect. And also some people saying, well, actually, she's bad. Either because of that build or because of other things. So, my thing with Ophelia is that there's a couple layers to it, right? Because on one hand, yes, that build is very strong. On the other hand, it is not free. Because you do, ideally you want to pass down Vantage from Odin, so that she can make use of Vantage, like, earlier on, which is one of your first 5 heart seals. And then she wants to dip into Master of Arms later. And also, you're not just gonna sort of walk through the whole game with it, because, like, a lot of people talked about it in a way where, like, oh, it trivializes the late game. It doesn't, and that's because there's just a lot of things put in place in the late game of Conquest to prevent a low manning or Juggernaut style of play.
Yeah.
And
you're thinking of, like, the Vantage Source stuff that you do in Birthright with, like, Dark Mage Talon Corrin. Because it is feasible to do it there, and, like, that game does not really have anything standing, like, as long as, you know, it's still high investment, but it doesn't really have anything standing in the way of doing that.
Whereas, like, Conquest, like, Chapter 24, Hinoka's map, there's, the Falco Knights have Aegis, which is like, okay, so that's just a chance for you to just not kill them like you're supposed to. Chapter 25, you can do it. I know Zoran has a couple videos showing it off. But it's not the most reliable way to do it. There's some sketchy hit rates there that you have to contend with if you're just soloing with Ophelia. There's Warding Blow Generals in Chapter 26.
And Stoneborn on the left-hand side, which, like, you know, you just go right, but...
Yeah, but the Generals you have to fight.
No matter what.
Yeah, so, you know, you're not steamrolling through the entire game with it, but I think sometimes I also kind of see the attitude of, like, well, it doesn't solo the rest of the game for you, therefore it's bad, which to me does not make much sense.
Well, that's why everyone's in D tier.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like, okay, I invested into Soul Hero Xander and he didn't solo the game. I guess that means Xander's a bad unit. Like, no. You invest into a unit, you get something really good out of it, you still gotta use other units, but that's just the way that the game is. There's nothing stopping you from using Vantage, Life and Death Ophelia to kill all of the enemies on Chapter 24 who don't have Aegis, and also you deploy some bow units to kill the Aegis Falco Knights. Like, there's nothing stopping you from that, and Ophelia is still giving you a lot of value. And it's not just the late game, and honestly, I'd argue that a lot of Ophelia's value for me is her mid-game performance, because unlike Leo, or even unlike Odin or Leo, she only needs one seal to be a Vantage sorcerer with like Nosferatu access instead of 2. And
that being the one you spend on Odin.
Yes. Yeah, you spend it on Odin to pass down Vantage. And Ophelia can do a lot with that, whether it just be just Nas tanking straight up, or Nas tanking a bunch of enemies to get them to low health, and then you're at low health, you're in Vantage range, so you switch to like Fire or Thunder or something. There's a lot of places in the game where she can do that pretty feasibly, pretty easily, and as well as just being a really high magic tome unit to make really good use of lightning. That we got a lot of value. We got a ton of value out of her in Chapter 21, the Endless Stairway, just because she was just so easily able to lightning all of the Stoneborn. And you can do the same to Wary Fighter Generals as well.
We had her and Percy handle an entire portion of Soleil's Paralog as well, just by having Percy lunge over the wall. Which, like, with Elise Mom, which isn't guaranteed, but I don't really know who else wants Elise Mom.
Yeah, the main moms
Ophelia herself can have lunge.
Yeah, the main moms that Ophelia would have are, like, Elise, Nyx, First Servant Felicia, and, like, Female Corrin, potentially. It's, like, kind of it. So yeah, there's also Nina's Paralog. You can also do the lunge thing with Ophelia really easily into the hallways, which is really funny.
To help you catch the Shining Bow guy. That fucking guy. I can never catch him.
So yeah, she... And just a lot of the mid-game chapters as well. Like, she's just a very strong unit. but not so strong that she solos the late game or whatever, and not free. Like, you do need to invest some into her.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that is A tier worthy. I just think that the perception of Ophelia is often very skewed to one of the two extremes.
On the topic of needing to invest in her, and this will sort of segue us into the third and final tier list we made, which includes the capturable units. I think that we should probably talk a little bit about investment, because I feel like, on the one hand, I feel like oftentimes things that I would describe, and I think you would describe as well, as like medium or low investment builds are often seen as high investment. Of like, okay, well, you spend, a heart seal and a friendship seal and a partner seal on the same unit, right? That's high investment. I would call that medium investment, especially if it can be like done slowly, or you have to spend 5 maps building a friendship in order to reclass into something. That's something I would call low investment, honestly, if you're just spending a single friendship seal. Whereas, and I don't think it's like evenly applied to everyone, because you see something like Laszlo gets 3 seals, a heart. Or not even a heart. No, he just needs 2 seals, a partner
2.
and a friendship,
2 seals.
To get 3 rallies, right?
Yeah.
And that is regarded as high investment. Meanwhile, the sort of thing that you described with Ophelia, some people call that high investment, but I've seen others refer to it as like low invest, because she inherits it from her dad. Or like, reclassing Veloria and getting Camilla mom, which is all its own form of investment, right? Like a highly in-demand mother, I think, is a unique investment. Or the number of seals you give the early servant is one that comes up pretty often. Jacob, in particular, he gets core in marriage and a heart seal and a partner seal all before chapter 10. And just sort of the uneven application of like what constitutes as high investment.
Yeah. Or for example, Xander, many people often assuming that he gets like Charlotte marriage and then partner seals into hero after 7 maps.
Mm-hmm.
But then...
And a heart seal into Wyvern.
Yeah, and a heart seal into Wyvern. But then under the Selena poll, some people talk about Wyvern Selena being high investment, even though that takes 4 maps in a friendship.
4 maps of friendship, and it comes online earlier.
Yeah. Now, of course, I do think there is some logic to it. I think people are going to be more willing to put investment into a unit who is stronger before said investment.
Mm-hmm.
And rightfully so,
Yeah.
Xander's already strong, so putting a heart seal into him to go Wyvern to make him even better for those more flight-intensive maps, it makes sense. But I do think sometimes to the extent that which it's applied differently to units is pretty unfair. Especially if we're talking units who, like the non-royals, right? Units who are not super strong pre-promotes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for example, like Nyx is an example where it's like there is that high investment Nyx build, but you're putting more resources into that than you are getting Odin to pass down Vantage to Ophelia. And I feel like they're both kind of looked at as higher investment things when it's like, no, these are very different from one another, both in terms of how much you're putting in and what you're getting out.
And I also think looking at, like, the pure number of resources, can be a little bit misleading, because, as we talked about, friendship seal, marriage seal, heart seal, I do not value those resources equally to each other. Even though you get roughly the same number, I think if you're doing all the paralogs, you get more friendship and partner than heart seal. But I might be wrong on that. 2 rev pilled, because you do get, like, you get a weird number of seals from a weird number of paralogs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also think they're in lower demand. And the units who want them often, not always, but often can afford to wait a little bit longer, both because they need some maps to build the support, and because it ends up being more of like a final class thing than a instant reclass thing. You know, like if you're trying to do Paladin Jacob, I mean, the late Jacob poll comments might disagree, but I think if you're trying to rock Paladin into Wyvern Jacob, like routing it that way, Jacob wants one of the early seals. He doesn't want to wait until you have like 4 available to spend one of them. If you're trying to send Mozu into Bozu, she wants one of the early heart seals. She's not going to wait until chapter 14. Whereas, you know, I mean, Selena by necessity has to wait in order to get Wyvern. But she still performs adequately as a mercenary in that time.
Right.
Laszlo by necessity needs to wait in order to get, you know, the other rally classes. But he still performs fine as a bow knight in that time.
Yeah. And also something I should note also is that, like, these resources are in the game for a reason, and that is for you to use them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I'm not gonna say like, oh, we should just assume that X unit gets X resources or whatever, but
yeah,
more so to the point of like, hey, you have 5 heart seals, they're gonna go to somebody, and so the idea that you would spend one of them on a good unit to like do something really strong, I don't think is that crazy. Like Elise or Silas or whoever. Because when we get into the last list, the one that includes the capturables, the idea of investment sort of did frame a lot of the conversation.
Yeah, of like, this unit, sure, other people can do this, but this unit does it for free.
Right.
I came up a lot around Rallyman, but I saw it amongst any capturable that had a unique skill, which...
Basically.
Yeah. We should probably talk about capturables. Well, we sort of talked around him, but we should probably start with Rallyman, shouldn't we?
Yup. Alright, so Rallyman may be the most debated unit placement. Definitely one of the most, and I would argue probably the most disagreeable placement on the entire community tier list for me.
This is our Tabarn in A tier moment.
I mean, you're not wrong. It honestly isn't even that far off of a comparison. So, Rallyman comes in, you capture him in Chapter 23, and assuming you're playing with hacked resources, you get him for Chapter 24, which, like, I usually do. Or, like, if you're not, and you still want to get him for Chapter 24, you're playing on real hardware, you could just, like, wait X amount of real days or whatever.
Yeah, do it for him, like the Homer Simpson Maggie sign.
If you're trying to like persuade him and like on a map by map basis, he's not in the game. But
no chain paralogs for Rallyman.
Yeah, so true. But yeah, he's around for 5 chapters. That's chapter 24 through endgame. Technically, there's Invasion 3, but let's be real, how many people care about Invasion 3?
I don't think I even played Invasion 2.
I've played Invasion 3, but I usually don't, and there's no reason most of the time that you would do it.
The energy drop in 0% growths, though.
So true.
Not even 0% growths plays Invasion 3. It's that fucking bullshit.
And like there's a late paralog I guess you could do, but also a lot of the late paralogs, like, you're not really... You don't need Rallyman to, like, one-turn Midori paralog if that's what you're doing.
But he can trap Candace while Midori trains her bow rank.
He's available. He's available in Chapter 24 through Endgame. That's 5 maps. And 2 of those maps are maps that a lot of people end up skipping. Now, I don't think you should assume that Chapter 25 and Endgame get skipped. Especially because I don't, personally. But... it is worth noting that if you're doing that, then Rallyman isn't really contributing either. So essentially, he's a unit who's contributing for 3 to 5 maps, depending on whether you're skipping those 2 or not.
If you're skipping endgame, he might contribute to meeting thresholds. Like, I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate. He might.
That's true.
He might.
Also,
he boosts magic and strength.
What?
He boosts both magic and strength.
He doesn't have rally magic.
No, it's not magic. Yeah, it's just strength and speed. But yeah, he still might contribute to meeting thresholds, like...
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe.
But even if we assume 5, even if we assume all 5, that's very little availability. Very little. And I don't think I could put any unit with that amount of availability above C tier.
What about Tabarn, though?
Okay. Well, just like Tabarn, the thing that he's supposed to do, he's also not even the only unit who does it. Or the best unit to do it, for that matter. He is free rally utility. It's rally strength, speed, defense, and res. There's a couple problems with that, though. Main one being that, of course, you can build other Rallybots with those rallies, and that sort of became the main topic of, like, discourse around Rallyman on the polls, was like, well, is the fact that he gets it for free more valuable than the fact that the other ones get it earlier? And obviously, like, people who voted Rallyman, like, A tier, S tier, or whatever, would argue that the other Rallybots, either it takes too much investment, or that the rallies are not helpful before that point. And obviously, I think Danny and I both disagree pretty massively on both of those ideas.
Yeah. I would say that the rallies are helpful on every map. Well, not on every map. I think that, like, rally defense on 10, for example, is one that you can point to as, like, not actually especially helpful. But I also think defense and res are, like, the least valuable of his two. Like, if I'm using Rallyman, it's because of strength speed. I value the offensive ones. The defensive ones are like gravy on top. But I think that helping units reach offensive benchmarks is always going to be a valuable trait. It's part of why I really like Fancy Footwork, because sometimes the +1 is enough. And even if you just need +1, well, I guess this comes back to the money thing, right? Of like, well, if you have rallies available, you save on tonics. If you have rallies available, you save on forges. If you have rallies available, you can potentially combine them with tonics and forges to meet thresholds that you wouldn't meet with any of them individually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that the rallies are definitely valuable in every chapter of the game. Especially strength and speed, but like selectively defense and res can also be valuable in specific maps. If you're trying to set up to like enemy phase ninja hell, for example, right? Maybe your bow unit is a little behind on the bulk thresholds and you want the boots instead of Shura. You can just rally defense then. Not unreasonable to have like one of the rallies at that point. Because the thing is, getting all 4 of them by Chapter 17, probably not going to happen. But you build your Rallyman piecemeal, and you usually get all 3 or 4 that you want online by... what would you say, like Chapter 20-ish?
So it depends, and it depends on who you're doing it with and which rallies you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an example that I like to use, because it is a bit more of a specific example, but I think it highlights how the idea that Rallybots take a lot of investment is often not true. So I've done multiple runs of this game without reclassing, like where I just do not use heart, partner, or friendship seals at all, just as a sort of like self-imposed challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And under that setting, what I did was I did Elise Percy and passed down strength and res from his 2 parents, and obviously he learned defense naturally. And then Laszlo Shigure. So Shigure got skill from his dad, and he learned speed naturally. And so in that setting, I was able to get all of Rallyman's rallies plus skill on 2 flying royal units with decent combat by, I believe it was chapter 18. And so it's kind of like, yeah, Rallyman's free. And granted, you know, you're not always going to want to do, like, Elise Arthur, like, as your pairing or whatever. But that is just an example. And of course, you can do other Rallybot setups where you spend 1 seal or 2 seals instead of 3. And if you just do it with the right units, and especially if you make good use of Gen 2, you can most of the time get all of Rallyman's rallies well before he joins on better units.
And I do think Gen 2 is the real nail in the coffin, because you have so many that just naturally get a singular rally from their offspring seal, and can pretty easily have other rallies passed down by their parents. You mentioned Shigure and Percy already, but Soleil also can get skill through offspring seal. Dwyer and Forrest can both get resistance. I think it's just those 5? But, like, that's 5 units to choose from, before factoring in that then there's Gen 1 people who can do it pretty good in the 2 mercenaries, Selena and Laszlo, both of whom have... So Selena has 2 natively in speed and skill, and then can access defense through friendship and the rally of your choice through marriage. Laszlo gets skill natively alongside fancy footwork, which will stack with the rally of your choice through marriage and strength through friendship. Usually I like getting strength through Selena marriage and speed for Laszlo's marriage, just because I do like the combination of strength and speed, but...
Especially with skill.
Especially with skill, yes. Strength, skill, speed, in my opinion, is the strongest rally combination. I would value strength, skill, speed over basically any combination of 4. Like if you lose... obviously not more than strength, skill, speed, plus another one, but if you have to lose one of those 3 in order to get 4, I would still prefer strength, skill, speed. Which is why I really like Laszlo, because fancy footwork not only means he can immediately start rallying, but also eventually stacks to give +5 in strength and speed. Yeah. Which, again, like, it can be relevant for meeting thresholds, even if it only means saving money on tonics. Which it doesn't even necessarily only mean.
Yeah, and if you have other Rallybots built, not only are they going to contribute more not only are they going to contribute more because they have those rallies before Rallyman shows up, but they're also going to be better for you on your team after he shows up, because they're going to be more mobile, and potentially have something else, like either like filler combat or the ability to use Dragon Veins. The big example is like chapter 24, Hinoka's map, where like they can be a flyer. If you like finished off by grabbing speed or defense, they can be a flyer on that map. But just in general, they are going to be more mobile and be able to do other things. The only other thing that Rallyman has that I did see some people point out is the idea of like deployment slot compression, which is that like if you have 2 Rallybots, like I did in like the Shigure Percy example, then you're spreading those out over 2 units as opposed to Rallyman, who's just 1 unit. But unfortunately, the thing that kind of makes that a moot point is like deployment slots. Again, you have 15 to 16 deployment slots in the late game of Conquest. You are not hurting for deploying more combat units so badly that you need to compress your rally utility into just 1 slot, you know?
Well, and you mentioned also, like, the build that you had involved no reclassing in order to get those rallies online. You could easily compress not all of them into the same unit, because if you want all 7 rallies, they need to be split amongst 2 units anyway. But you could compress the Rallybot roll 4 of them down to a single unit pretty easily. I already mentioned Selena and Laszlo, who Selena needs 3 seals, Laszlo needs 2. But if that's, like, if you don't want, if say you want to use both of them as, like, combat bow knights, Elise Percy, who you mentioned, can inherit speed from Elise because she has Zura friendship, and skill from Arthur because he has Niles friendship. And then he himself already has strength, resistance, and defense in his native class set, and he can sort of jump around as needed to get them once you recruit him as a Gen 2 unit. And then he has 5 rallies, and they perfectly complement Izana's luck and magic for all 7. So, you know,
yeah,
that's something. I would consider that to be a high investment rally build, but that's also getting 5 rallies on a single unit. I would generally think that getting 5 rallies, and 5 valuable rallies, well, not all 5 are valuable, but strength, speed, and skill are, like, I consider that
even then, like, I still think defense and res are good. Like, they're less good than the other rallies, but I still think they are good skills that you want.
Oh, I do think they're good. Yeah, I do think they're good. I don't want to misconstrue my point. It's not that these are bad rallies. It's, I don't know, maybe I'm just too focused on the offensive rallies. But yeah. I do think that the one thing that you didn't say yet that Rallyman has going for him is, even if you've built if you've only built 1 Rallybot, there are some maps where having 2 can be useful. So, like, say you've built up your, Selena, right? She's got speed, strength, defense, and skill. And then you capture Rallyman, and you're playing the Ryoma map honestly, quote-unquote honestly. You do benefit from having a Rallybot on both sides of the map, potentially. But the problem there is, again, oftentimes the Gen 2 units are just so free in getting even just 1 or 2 rallies, which, like, 1 or 2 is less than 3 or 4, but sometimes that can be enough. Like, in our playthrough,
you don't need rally. Rally res from Rallyman goes completely unused on that map because there's 0 magical enemies, for example. And that is something he can be used for. Though even then, I don't, it's useful, but at the same time, it's like, okay, that's what his utility is, being a secondary Rallybot on 2 maps. Like, I think, like, I have him listed as C on mine, just because, honestly, I think D is also quite reasonable for Rallyman. I put C just because I was feeling a little generous, and, like, it's not like the rally utility is bad, even though it is very replaceable.
Yeah.
So, it's like he's still doing something, but he's doing something for 5 maps, y'all, that you arguably want other units for more so because they can do it earlier. Like, that is C at the absolute highest.
Yeah. I would say a low C at the absolute highest. Like, even some of the generally considered pretty poor units, I would say usually offer you more than Rallyman.
100%.
Much investment.
Yeah, no, I think Parry's, like, short-term, like, mid-game combat, for sure, is, like, more valuable than Rallyman.
Yeah. I don't know how seriously to take these comments. I don't know whether it was people memeing or not, but I did get a few about, like, Rallyman's combat being good because he's in Master of Arms and has, like, capped weapon ranks, so he can use whatever weapon you want. Again, I don't know how seriously to take these comments. I feel like some people will see, like, Conquest, hard game. You know, I don't know whether it's the hardest. It's definitely like top 5 hardest Fire Emblems, right?
Sure.
And as a result of that, if you can capture these enemies who are so difficult for you to kill, then they must be really, really strong. But they're not, like, statistically ahead of your units. In fact, they're usually statistically behind many of your units. It's more that they can more freely use, like, silver weapons, and they also have skill combinations that can be threatening in enemy hands, but less threatening in player hands. And they're in formations that are very scary and threatening. Like, think the lunge chain in the Ryoma map. None of those individual enemies are particularly scary on their own. It's the fact that you get lunge chained halfway across the map and have to fight all of them at the same time. But you can't replicate that.
In fact, the enemies on that map were purposefully given quite below average stats for that point in the game because they have inevitable end, so... Yeah, a lot of the times the enemies are not actually statistically impressive compared to your units.
The exception is, like, some of the paralog enemies, and in particular paralog bosses. Which I guess brings us to one of the other capture travesties. I don't think, like, Nicole is one of the best units in the game. But it kind of blows my mind that he ended up in C tier when fucking Rallyman took A. And even Haitaka and Kumagera, who were just, like, generally worse than him, ended up above him.
Yeah.
Because he's just, like... I mean, obviously, you know, some people brought up the capturable Wyvern on his map. The capturable Wyvern Lord has, like, better stats than him. But he's still, like, another copy of Camilla, who just doesn't scale as well. That's pretty good, right? I don't know.
Yeah, so Nicole is an interesting one because I think it can depend, because if you recruit Nicole with, if you pair Silas with a later joining partner for him, then Nicole is going to join a bit later, and that is going to hurt. I would also argue, though, that Silas's best pairings are some of the earliest. I think the latest joining women that he really wants to S-support are Veruca and Camilla, but that's still not really, like, late. You know, it's chapter 10. And otherwise, I would say his best pairings are, like, Effie, Mozu, and Azura. So I think, generally speaking, Nicole is going to be recruited around your earlier end in terms of paralogs. And, yeah, he is worse than Camilla. They have similar growths, actually, but Camilla's internal level is way lower, so she's going to scale better just by virtue of actually leveling.
Yeah.
Whereas Nicole is not really for a while.
And she has better class access. Like, staying in Wyvern is still fine, but she can go Maid for 1-2 range. She can go Berserker if you want, to do, like, silly Berserker stuff.
Yeah. This kind of goes for all of the capturable... We didn't really bring it up for Rallyman because he's more of a utility unit, but for combat capturables, they are all at an innate downside due to the lack of class access and a lack of support bonuses. And so, to truly stand out from a combat perspective, they either need really insane stats or some unique skills. And Nicole has really, really good stats. Again, he's basically a second Camilla who joins a bit after Camilla, who also scales worse. But that's still good.
To be clear, I don't think that he, like, belongs in B tier. But the fact that he ranked lower than the main game capturables, I guess, is partially because maybe there's people who just don't know about him, because he is in an optional chapter. I think it's more likely that he just doesn't have unique skills, so he seems less cool just because he is more boring than certain blow Oni. Because I've got plenty of Wyverns. I don't have any Oni. I don't have certain blow
Right.
Oni.
Yeah, same with Haitaka.
Yeah. Although, I guess we should talk about Haitaka and Kumagera, since they did rank pretty high. Should we talk about Haitaka first? Because I think he does actually have, like, a niche, even if it's not necessarily as great as some people say.
Yeah, so Haitaka, he's got pretty solid bases for his join time, and fairly solid offensive growths, like in strength and speed. His big problem, combat-wise, is that, being lance-locked in Conquest is not great. There's a lot of the really good lances that, like, really stand out are, like, some of the Hoshidan ones, like the Guard Naginata, that you can't get. He does have Javelin and Beast Killer access, which is nice, but also those are D rank. That's not, like, nearly unique to him in any way. In general, like, you would if you're going to be locked to a single weapon type, obviously you'd rather have it be, like, bows or daggers or tomes, but even outside of that, like, I would rather take axes over lances.
Would you take swords
and he does
over
not have
lances, or would you take lances over swords? I'm curious.
Depends on the unit. Cause, like, I'm trying to think, like, the Levin sword exists, so there's, like, Levin sword swordmaster stuff you could do, but it kind of depends, I guess. Beast Killer is quite nice.
Yeah.
But either way, I think lances and swords are the two worst weapon types in the game overall. And he does not have the magic to use tomes in Basara, so...
Well, okay. This was not brought up as a serious strategy, but I do want to draw attention to it, because somebody did the math in a very funny way. An instant promotion, Fire +1, and Magic Tonic lets him solo the Archer half of Chapter 10, I believe is what it was.
It might be a Fire +2, but otherwise,
Fire
yes.
+2, yes. Yeah, Fire +2, Magic Tonic, instant promotion to Basara. He solos the right side of Chapter 10. And then the person, like, immediately said...
Who could do that?
The commenter immediately said, like, is it worth all this investment? No, but it's funny. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because I wouldn't, like, name and shame anyone who was, like, seriously advocating for things that I find quite silly like that. But if you're sillily advocating for things I find quite silly, I mean... Look, I'm the person who ran fucking Rallyman Elise with strength, defense, res, and speed, which she can't access in Conquest. So, like...
True.
If only she could get Master of Arms and be the true rally woman.
That's why you gotta do it with Corrin.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But yeah, so... His combat, like, he has good combat. He has nice combat stats, but he is held back quite a bit by his weapon type. Otherwise, the main unique thing he really has is... Oh, and also, I should note that, like, if all you care about is just, like, a lance combat unit, who can, like, use the good lances and do big damage, he is still outclassed. Effie is the most notable, being a unit with a huge strength stat and also her personal skill. And she can go Great Knight for more movement than Spearmaster. And she starts off with lower lance rank than Haitaka, but, like, she's gonna have enough to use whatever you want her to use at the time that it's actually available. And is also very strong in that role. So yeah, the main unique thing that Haitaka has is, as you mentioned, rally defense. But
I just want to, because I know there's going to be some people who say that he has a movement advantage over Effie, Silas is another good lance combat unit. Even if you're not doing Great Knight Effie.
Yeah, that too. But yeah, like you mentioned, there's rally defense. I'll let you talk a little bit about rally defense, actually. I think you might have more to say than I do.
I don't have much to say. I think early, so unlike Rallyman, who gives you those rallies when you could probably reasonably have them on your own, you're not going to have rally defense for quite a while after Haitaka joins, in most scenarios. You could spend a Heart Seal on Camilla and power level her to 5, potentially. But I think that that's investment that's not worthwhile. Camilla is fine in Malignite. Going to Wyvern doesn't meaningfully change things, as opposed to like going Berserker or Maid, where she fulfills a completely different role, and that might be worth early investing. Sending her just Wyvern, or even Sorcerer, which again, like, very different role than Malig. Sending her just Wyvern doesn't meaningfully change how Camilla is working, and I think is pretty definitively a waste of one of your first 5 Heart Seals. So Haitaka is going to be your only rally defenser for a while. And that's nice. Like, +4 defense. I like the offensive rallies more, but especially for Chapter 11, which is a very enemy phase-oriented map, it can help you reach thresholds you wouldn't otherwise. It can save you money on tonics. And I do think that for that reason, he's the best of the capturables, because unlike everyone else, he actually has a unique niche he can offer your team that cannot be replicated easily by a named character. Even then, like, it's just one rally, and eventually you will get somebody who has access to rally defense. At which point, Haitaka's just kind of like... I think even if you want to use Haitaka, you're probably using him short-term. Again, unless you like him. Like, if you... I don't understand the people who are like, my favorite character in the entire franchise is this person with 0 voice lines. 0 lines of dialogue and their exclamation point level up. But I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum. If you are the person with Haitaka posters all over your bedroom, bring him to endgame, have him kill Takumi at Weapon Triangle Disadvantage, post it on YouTube, he's S tier. If you're just trying to do whatever's quote-unquote, like, best for your team, I think most of the time, he doesn't ever get a slot, but if he does get a slot, I think it's just for a few maps while you're building towards other rally defense. Yeah. Because in addition to, we mentioned that, like, his class access sucks because he doesn't have supports. I meant to bring this up in the Shura segment, but I'll bring it up here with the capturables. Losing out on supports doesn't just hurt the unit who can't support, but also, in my opinion, hurts your entire team, because you get paralogs more slowly, you get reclass options for other units more slowly, and you get child units to sort of like fill your roster more slowly. And I think that all 3 of these are very valuable things for the team at large. Paralogs let you sort of jump the EXP curve. It's kind of the only way to reasonably get level 15 skills, or even multiple level 5 skills on a singular unit. The kids have a lot of flexibility in terms of, I mean, we talked about the ways you can build them in terms of Rallybots, but there's a lot of other aspects to combining multiple inheritable skills to make a kid have a skill combination without making them class jump a bunch. You know, we mentioned Soleil getting some skills from, like, some skills that Soul Ninjas would like Elbow Room or whatever, without needing to jump back and forth herself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, being able to pass classes onto other units, pretty self-explanatory why that's useful for your team.
Yeah. Well, and also, a lot of the paralogs have, side objectives and, like, extra stuff in them that you benefit from as well. Percy's and Ophelia's are the most obvious. Percy with the money, Ophelia with all those tomes.
Yeah.
But even then, Nina's paralog has a lot of treasure. Forest paralog has some gold in it.
Sophie and Soleil give you seals and stat boosters.
Yes, and
for saving
Dwyer's.
green units.
Yes, and Dwyer's as well.
Oh, and Dwyer's as well, yeah.
Yeah. So in addition to EXP, there's also just a lot of gold and items that you really want to get from them. So,
well, and on the topic of Dwyer, several child units start with items in their inventory, which can be useful. Like, Dwyer has the only Festal in the game and a physics tab.
Yeah.
Even if you, like, even for the lower value, like, Ignatius has, like, a Steel Lance, I want to say. But you can just sell that shit.
Here's a javelin.
Oh, he's a javelin.
Cool.
But like, even if they just start with a weapon and you're not planning on using them, you can sell that shit. Like, that's gold.
Yeah, Ignatius and Seigbert, the bosses of their paralogs, have a friendship and partner seal, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, quite a bit of stuff that you would want. And the dragon herbs from Midori's paralog.
Yeah, dragon herbs from Midori's paralog. Notably, Kana's paralog is the only one that has no treasure. Well, no Shigure.
Shigure, yeah.
So, classic Kana L, and unfortunately splash damage on Shigure.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of paralogs that you want to go to, and, you know, messing with paralog routing isn't great, and also just even then, like, in the meantime, the fact that he doesn't provide support bonuses to other units when he's, like, any capturable, I say he is in, like, Haitaka, but any capturable, the fact that they don't provide support bonuses, to your actual named units when supporting them does suck. So, yeah, and to wrap it up on Haitaka, yeah, you would use him for rally defense short term, and also, like, he has decent combat stats.
Yeah, he can do some work for you on Chapter 10 if you want.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is, like, yeah, the rally defense isn't always helpful in that short term. Chapter 10, like you mentioned, your units are so spread out, and a lot of the time what's really important for you there is reaching offensive benchmarks, so that you can one-round the enemies and not get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I've had some people say, I've never tried using him on Chapter 10, so correct me if I'm wrong, but he can actually push you over the edge to the point where units will ignore you, because if they deal 0 damage, they ignore you in Conquest.
Yeah, that's only with, like, Silas or, like, Effie and maybe Dragonstone Corrin. But yeah, that is a thing. My thing against rally defense on Chapter 10 is mostly just, like, your units are so spread out, it's not actually going to do that much.
Yeah.
And then Chapter 12, as well as another one, where, the pot, like, right in front of your starting location gives +4 defense. And, again, if you combine, like, that is free, and you don't need a deployment slot on Haitaka for that. And if you were to combine it with rally defense, a lot of the enemies, like, the lower strength enemies, would just ignore you.
Yeah, I guess, like, you could, if you're using, like, really low bulk units, like Nyx or something, you could be funny and be like, well, +8 defense on Nyx.
That too.
And, like, that is relevant, right? You know, like, or Felicia. Like, Felicia, if we're talking. I was gonna say Elise, but then I remembered it's Chapter 12.
Yeah.
Like,
so yeah,
Felicia can try out that brand new Flame Shuriken. +8
you
defense,
can, but it's, I would say, less relevant on Chapter 12 than... But yeah, like, Chapter 11, Chapter 13, like... But even then,
well,
at
you
that
mentioned
point...
13, there's a huge deploy cut in 13. You lose, like, 3 slots.
There's also that, yes.
Which is why... I guess, like, looping in Kumagera, we can still talk about Haitaka, but I think at this point, the two of them together face the problem of, like, who are you benching for these units?
Yeah, that's the thing. Kumagera is, I think, a lot worse than Haitaka. I think, like...
He's fighting with Leah, Xander, and Keaton. Like, they just joined.
Yeah. So... Haitaka, or not Haitaka, Kumagera got B tier on the community list. I think I would put him at low C when I'm being generous. He's not great. He has no utility. His main thing is just, well,
he has shove, but you can capture Onis in Chapter 10 for that.
Yeah. His skills that he comes with are counter magic, which is not really.
Sorry.
No, counter magic is very funny. You can laugh. Darting blow and certain blow, which are actually good.
But not really on him.
Huh?
But not really on him. Like,
well,
he's
so
statted like he's statted like an enemy phase unit, and he has 2 blows.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is that Kumagera has very poor hit rates without certain blow. Like, we are talking Nyx levels of hit rates with his skill and his luck.
That's potentially an insult to Nyx. He can't get Lucky 7.
That too, God. And he doesn't have Heartseeker.
Yeah, he doesn't have Heartseeker, and he can't get Lucky 7. Like, I'm sorry. I agree with you that Nyx is pretty bad, but comparing Kumagera's hit rates to Nyx is unfair and slanderous. Nyx is better.
Yeah, so... Well, okay, he is helped out a little bit by having capped weapon ranks.
That's true.
So but that's like what? Plus, he caps at A, axes, B tomes, so that's like +5 hit to tomes and +10 hit to axes.
Less than Heartseeker, less than Lucky 7.
Yup.
Like each individually. Forget combining them.
Yeah, so he can't make great use of his bulk because, like, having bulk can still be helpful on a player phase unit, but it's definitely limiting. And also, like, he has decent base magic, but it's not great, and he has a very poor magic growth. It's like 15 or 20%. So he's not going to be like an enemy phase. Even if he did have really good hit rates, he's not going to be like 1-2 ranging with tomes, like, for very long. So he's mainly relegated to a player phase unit with axes, with using Certain Blow and Darting Blow. Certain Blow fixes his hit rates, because that skill is just that fucking good.
So good, yeah.
Darting Blow, it brings his speed up from kind of poor to solid, but not great, because he has 14 base speed, so it brings him up to 19 on player phase, which is nice, but he's not exactly that fast, and his speed growth is also not that good either, so long term, he's not going to have very good speed even with Darting Blow.
Well, that's why you capture the Falconites on his join map, to rally his speed.
True, except actually those are Sky Knights, so you have to either promote the Sky Knights
or Kinshis, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Heartseal and the generic Kinshi Knight to get rally speed.
Fuck yeah. No, you capture the Sky Guard ones from Hinoka's chapter.
True. But yeah, Kumagera, like, he just ends up being very limited. He's not a great enemy phase unit at all. And player phase, like, he has good strength, but again, his speed is not as impressive as you would like, and again, if all you want is like a high strength player phase unit, there are other options for that are just either more mobile or more available and have supports and all that.
Berserker Benny.
See, this is where... Actually, I'm curious, hold on. Let's see. At Ninian. This is for science.
Are we live comparing Berserker Benny to Kumagera?
You know, he's better, but he's not that much better.
Kumagera's better?
Kumagera only has 2 more speed than Berserker Benny. Granted, he has Darting Blow. But...
Well, that's why you marry Azura.
Marry Azura.
Fighter Darting Blow Benny can still win!
For a second, I thought you were saying marry Azura to Kumagera.
Yeah, that's how you get the secret Gen 3. That's how you get the secret Gen 3 unit. Shiguragera.
Shiguragera, yeah. Yeah, no, Kumagera's not very good.
Yeah. I would say, like, even if you just want a shove bot, which I do think is probably his best use case, he's strictly outclassed by the Oni because he's considered promoted level 20. So he takes longer to get to shove than they do. So just, like, capture a chapter 10
and you capture him later.
Yeah, you also capture him later, too.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah.
I feel like, again, it's the novelty thing, like you mentioned, where it's like, oh, he's an Oni, and he has, like, this cool combination of skills, so...
I mean, Certain Blow and Darting Blow are good, like, and they're good when combined with each other. If only there were a way you could get them on a unit who's not Kumagera. Alas, that is impossible.
Yeah.
It's not actually impossible. Certain Blows from Sniper and Darting Blows from Skynet.
Granted, it's harder in Conquest.
Yeah, it's
than it
harder
is
in Conquest, actually, than in Rev. Mozu would have to pass Certain Blow down to someone.
Well, I think it would, actually... I think you might have to use Corrin in some fashion.
Yeah, you might have to use Corrin, because I'm thinking about it, and, like...
Yeah, I think so, actually, but...
And Selena, and... Yeah, you'd have to use Corrin.
Damn, I guess Kumagera is good after all.
Damn, Kumagera is basically Corrin. I think that's the takeaway.
True! That's what we've learned from all this.
I feel like that's probably a good note to end on, but do you have any, like, final closing thoughts about any of the units we haven't talked about, or any topics you feel like we need to talk about that we haven't touched on?
Let's have a look-see here.
We didn't
going
talk
through
about
it. All the
Gazak.
Oh, wait.
I know Gazak's like a fan favorite, but I feel like he got appropriately tiered. Like, I can see him in D tier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Gazak got in C, which is fair. However, Gazak, I believe, had the closest pull between two options.
Oh yeah, he had the AC runoff, right?
Yeah, at the very least, it was, I believe, within 2% of either A tier or C tier, which I think is probably because, I think Gazak sort of exemplifies the difference in people's mentalities the most when it comes to captures.
Well, I hear he's a pretty good Takumi killer.
Danny, should we talk about that?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Don't worry, we'll get to that.
Okay. But yeah, he is a high-statted unit who comes for free. And so, I feel like he most exemplifies the differences in people's mentalities, where if you are really pro-capture, I feel like you're going to love him, and if you're not pro-capture, you're not really going to care that much. I think C is fair. I left a comment.
It's worth noting, because his growth rates are pretty impressive. He doesn't use those until you capture him. He uses generic growths as a red unit.
Yeah, which is more relevant to Gazak than the others because his paralog comes later. Than like someone like Nicole, so he will actually auto levels with those for a time. I left a comment under the Gazak poll saying he's most comparable to Veloria in that he is a late joining ball of stats, but is kind of limited in some ways. And I stand by that, but I do, like I said there, I do think he's worse than Veloria. Not being able to inherit skills, not being able to support people obviously is a factor. But also, like, Veloria and Gazak become available at the same time, basically, because you get Leo and Keaton at the same time. But she has some of those other advantages, and the option to, like, say, reclass into Wyvern if you did, like, Baruka or Camilla Mom, and stuff like and also being able to augment her stats by equipping a different stone.
Yeah, if she stays in the Wolf Signer line.
Yeah, if she stays. So, I think she's better than him, but again, like, I put Veloria in B, so there's no way I'm putting Gazak in A. And I don't think, like, again, if all you care about is, like, player phase, and it's a little similar to the Kumagera situation, where, like, he has good bulk, but being locked to axes does limit that, because, like, you can do some enemy phasing with a hand axe, but the later you get into the game, the more kind of convoluted that becomes. And the more you're probably just using an axe-locked unit as a player phase unit.
Have you considered, because I know you say, you know, he is worse than Veloria because she can inherit skills. Have you considered Veloria inherits 2 skills of your choosing, but Gazak actually inherits 3. Pavai, Certain Blow, and Good Fortune.
Yeah. have you considered that he inherits one skill because
Right, Pavias is the only one that actually matters. It's the only good skill.
Yeah, you know.
Keeps him alive.
But yeah, Pavis doesn't matter. Good Fortune's a nice bonus, but it doesn't really make or break a unit at all.
It is funny because he has like probably the highest HP of any unit that will ever have Good Fortune.
True, yeah. Like unless you dip Keaton for it.
Does Keaton like Gazak has a 95% HP growth as a fighter? Is Keaton gonna be matching that?
Let's look it up.
Because I don't think so. Like, I legitimately think Gazak has better HP than Keaton.
It'll be close. I don't know if Keaton's better, but they'll be close. Hold on.
We're doing science here. I mean, I'm telling you, Gazak is a pretty good Takumi killer.
Let's see.
Good Fortune is a key part of the Takumi killing. The Takumi killing build. Because he has to recover that HP after Takumi counters him.
Oh, I don't think I quite did it right. It looks like Gazak will have a bit more. Yeah, it looks like Gazak will have a bit more, because I think Berserker has more HP than Wolfsegner.
But the main reason I've been talking about Takumi Killer Gazak is I actually lied to all of you fine folks in the audience. I actually lied at the beginning of this video. So, at the beginning of this video, I said that I've never made a Conquest tier list, but that's not entirely true. I am throwing on screen a list that myself, Luna, and one of our mutual friends worked on together. This is the ODoyle list. Okay, the story behind this, because you might look at it and say, what the fuck are these rankings? These go completely against basically everything that you have said over the past, 2 hours. And that's true. These are not meant to be the actual T-rings. This is not how I actually feel about the cast. This is not how we actually feel about the cast. This is a troll list. This was bait. This was, in my opinion, some very well made bait. It actually caught, this bait was good enough that it created a fucking Conquest-focused podcast just to talk about how bad the tier list was. We created a character, ODoyle, who has seen 3 Zoran videos and 2 mecha tier lists, played through Conquest on normal once, and decided that makes them an expert on the game. And has unearned confidence and the worst manners you've ever seen in defending these garbage points.
I mean, give yourself some credit, because the 3 of us, came up with the tier list itself. You were the one who created and played the ODoyle character. That was all your handiwork.
Yeah, I used, so I have an old Reddit account. I don't use Reddit for anything serious. I don't think I've ever used Reddit for anything serious. But I do use Reddit to fuck with people. So I posted this on Reddit under the old account, ODoyle. And then we astroturfed controversy around it by asking 5 or 6 people to post it to different Fire Emblem Discords saying look at this ridiculous tier list I found. What the fuck is this person thinking? So that attracted a bunch more attention than a mostly dormant account should have gotten. I think my favorite touch is Fuga in Didn't Recruit. For those who are not aware, Fuga is not available on Conquest. He is a Rev exclusive unit.
Yep. Yeah, this was all just come up with on a whim one night in a late night, like 2 a.m. Discord call. It was very fun. Very silly, and I think that, like, obviously this is like a hyperbolized version of what someone might think, but at the same time, I think it's very interesting. I actually I don't have the list pulled up in front of me right now. How much does it actually line up with the community list?
So it's not actually all that close to the community list. I'll send you a picture right now. The big thing is, like, a lot of the ideas align. Niles is an S tier, not because he's a good bow unit, but because this person wants to bend the capture mechanic over and unload into its rear end. Corrin, I put female and male Corrin in separate tiers because female Corrin can marry Jacob. Which, again, Jacob and Felicia got ranked very close to each other in the same tier. But there was a lot more discourse around what Jacob gets from Corrin marriage than Felicia. So, while not reflective of where the ODoyle list was, it was, the general idea was there. There were some truly silly things that were not reflected, though.
Some placements were identical, like Midori.
Midori and Kana. I put Midori very high because of the money. I put Charlotte in A tier purely on the Xander backpack roll. And I got very toxic in the comments about it. I want to go over some of the toxicity because that's some of my favorite stuff about the ODoyle, because I spent like a week in character as ODoyle. First, whenever anyone would ask me a question,
to the point where, like, I was waking up to DMs from Danny being like, oh, I have to fucking play this character. This is a little infuriating.
Yeah, so the worst part about ODoyle is that many of ODoyle's comments got positive upvotes. I'm pretty sure that this entire list was, like, very karma positive for me. I don't know what that means, but that's what people have told me. But I downvoted every single comment I made, and most of them are in the positive. So that's depressing. But not just because, like, I was incorrect, like, that's fine or whatever. I was toxic as shit, and, like, intentionally so, because I'm playing this person who doesn't know what they're talking about, and as a result of that, lashes out angrily whenever anyone, like, pushes back against their opinion. One of my favorite things to pull up is whenever anyone would say, like, this doesn't work, like, these numbers are not correct, I would say, have you even played on Lunatic? I'm talking about the Lunatic stats, not the hard mode stats. They're different, which, for anyone who's not aware, I think Takumi is, like, the only character who has different stats on Lunatic versus hard, aside from some of the paralogs.
Yeah, it's like the paralogs, Takumi, maybe there's some odd exception in some random chapter, but yeah, 99% of the time, the stats are the same.
For the most part, the changes are extra skills and extra enemies in some instances, like the formations change up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a favorite. I also would constantly pull out efficiency whenever people would ask, like, what is your argument for such and such? I'd say, well, I use efficiency.
The one non-toxic thing that you would say is like, oh yeah, I'm judging based off of efficiency, and then no further elaboration as to what that actually means.
Let me find... So, at one point someone said, like, Kana in C tier is insane, and obviously what they meant is Kana should have been significantly lower than C tier, because Kana's kind of shit. But I decided that ODoyle misunderstood and goes, you're probably right about Kana. They should be higher, since Corrin is so good, and Kana is, of course, just another Corrin. I'm just always disappointed by them. I guess I was letting personal experience affect the list, which is a mistake on my part. I'm sorry. Objectively, there probably be. I shouldn't have let personal experience affect me.
That one's very good. I think my favorite one My favorite thing, and it's a small detail, I'm not sure if anyone actually brought it up in the comments of the Reddit post, is that with the exception of Niles because of capture, all the units who start off sword-locked or bow-locked are, like, low tier.
I love that. Well, also Keaton and Veloria are both E tier because they're 1 range locked.
Or, yeah. Sword lock, like 1 range locked or 2 range locked, with the exception of Niles, are all low tier.
Let's see. Somebody said, efficiency is a subjective term. You should probably define it before you have any discussion. I said, efficiency cares about how fast we're going, but we're not LTC. That's what I base this around, the efficiency strategies. Which, unfortunately, there are people who will, like, seriously throw that out as a legitimate argument, which is a little bit... Again, like, many of these are karma positive. Like, I used efficiency. If a unit was good for the... Oh, yeah. Despite efficiency, Effie and Benny I gassed up like no one else. The line that I would constantly use is, pair up solves Benny's move issue.
Which is like... It's like half true, but also... Oh, goodness. I think...
Also,
I'm sorry, I also think my favorite is Odin and Nyx being in the same tier, but also both above Leo.
Well, Ophelia in S tier. Unfortunately, the most believable part of the bait.
Yeah, that almost happened in the community tier list.
For anyone who's unaware, the reason that I put Nyx in C tier is she's the best NOS tank until Ophelia shows up. But the reason I kept repeating that Gazak is a good Takumi killer is by far the most fun thread. Was one of the first people asked, who was your Takumi killer? And I said it was Gazak. Or I said, I used Ophelia in my first run. Right, because ODoyle was pretending to have played Conquest multiple times, despite not having done that. So, right. I said I used Ophelia in my first playthrough, and then Gazak on all... That was before I realized how busted capture was, and I used Gazak on all future ones. And somebody actually ran the math and pointed out that Gazak actually cannot one-round Takumi because he doesn't reach... Like, because of caps, he doesn't reach it since he can't get support bonuses from people. So,
yeah, or get damage boosting skills outside of Axe Fair.
Yes. He's like 2 points short or something. So they ran the math. My first response was, of course, I'm talking about lunatic, not hard mode numbers. Because that was my first response to anyone pointing out that I was incorrect. But then they pulled up the math as like, this is the lunatic numbers. So Doyle pivoted to use the lottery shop to get a forged Brave Axe.
Lottery shop to get a forged Brave Axe is
iconic.
Truly one of the features of all time.
But yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out the legendary ODoyle post. If I remember, it'll be linked in the difficulty. Yeah, this person is very upset. His stat caps do not support this man killing Takumi. I need to know exactly what damage boosting skills you let Gazak use to one-round the 77 attack threshold. Lol, if you really think it's impossible, you haven't explored just how liquid stats are in Fates. I've seen base level Mozu kill Takumi. Literally anyone can do it. Several things you didn't factor in. The Enfeeble Staff, or hidden weapons, will reduce Takumi's bulk thresholds. Brave Axe +1 has 10 might, parentheses easily farmable from the level 3 lottery shop BTW. Critical hits, parentheses especially...
I love the addition to the word easily.
Critical hits, especially with killer weapons for 4 times damage. Or pre-chipping with human waves.
I love how it's like, we're saying one-rounding even though we're not one-rounding. Because it's other units chipping beforehand.
Getting a break, hold on. forgot. Okay.
This is,
I composed myself. I forgot that I said to 1 round. I forgot that I said that to 1 round you pre-chip with human wave sizes. Which is not 1 round
you played this
anymore.
character so well that the character made you burst out laughing months later.
I recognize that this is like Obama giving himself the medal. Oh, right, the Zoran thing. So, somebody said, like, somebody commented that, like, Ophelia is not S tier. And I was like, I quote-unquote taught them that, you know, you might think Ophelia's bad, but have you considered pairing Ophelia with Elise? And it sounds weird because Elise is a staff-locked unit, but have you considered Wyvern Elise, this cool new meta strategy that I discovered totally on my own, with no help whatsoever? Let me just quote several Zoran videos, and then when someone replies saying, like, you're just parroting Zoran talking points, I pretend I don't know who Zoran is and say that I don't watch YouTubers because they don't know what they're talking about. Despite the fact that ODoyle is basing all of their opinions on YouTubers.
Incredible. Yeah, no, the ODoyle list was very fun to come up with and very fun to... We had to, like, we really fine-tuned it, too, because we were like, it has to be believable enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
you can't just go, you can't say Charlotte in S tier, but you could say Charlotte in A tier.
Yeah, A tier Charlotte, because Xander needs the speed. The funny thing is, when people pointed out, like, Arthur in F versus Charlotte in A, I was like, I don't value backpacks very highly. The one exception is Charlotte, because Xander needs the speed.
Incredible.
The Selena thing, right. I didn't like Selena because she's sword locked, I think. Oh, no, I said Selena has bad availability.
Oh, yeah.
I said that she's the last unpromoted unit to join, which isn't even true.
There's like 6. Or, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, 6 Gen 1 units to join after her that are unpromoted.
Well, and Baruka made B tier, and she joins alongside her unpromoted.
Yeah, but Baruka's a Wyvern, Danny.
Yeah, Wyvern good.
Danny Wyvern.
I kept bringing up, like, using Javelin spam, like it's Game Boy Advance. And... Oh, right, the Mozu thing. So, Mozu... I just kept saying Mozu trainee bad. And I think that was the most upvoted comment that I made, which... Again, unsurprising, but... I would like to think based on where Mozu ended up in this community tier list, at the very least, most people would disagree with.
Yeah.
I will end with just a very simple exchange between ODoyle and another person. They go, OP, your rankings are genuinely all over the place. And I said, well, yeah, different units are going to be ranked in different places. And that got at least 3 upvotes, because I downvoted it, and it has a +2 on its point score system.
Truly, we live in a society.
Oh, right! Kaze in D tier because it was Noodle Arm, and Rez is a meme stat.
I think ODoyle should have considered how liquid stats are in Fates. I don't think they factored that in.
That only applies to Gazak.
Real. I hope everyone has enjoyed.
I hope that if nothing else, you can take solace in the fact that your list is significantly better than ODoyle's.
Yes, at the very least.
Y'all take care, everyone.
Yeah, thank y'all for watching. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you to Eris, Len, Gameboo, Karosa, Fyron, Smazruby, Zychrom, Robin D, Alenby, Ethan P3, Girlboss, Lizard Bongwater, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Jaden, Calamity Callie, They Thumb, Andu, Reflect, A Clever Username of Lies, YLO1, George Grenville the 7th BN, Jamie Collins, Mean Jojo, Thick Molder, Arvis, Tailored Muffin, Floahay, Faulty Videos, Lyra, Toaster But Really, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Just Riley, Anna Cabana, Belle Wenska, Dysike, Ginger, Root Beer Pants, Queen Eliza, Aerith Emblem, Adele, Gabe the Green, Control Aegis, Roman Kormancic, Nick Nack Hammersmack, SUP, Caius Cole, Heistiklop, Bree, and especially Mike Jakins, Autumn Kelsey, Some Trades, and Lilzabeth. There's a link to the Patreon below if you are interested in supporting as well. But regardless of what you choose to do, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.